The first pale tinge of dawn crept across the ragged battlements of Winterfell like the brush of a timid painter, tinting broken stone and hoarfrost with a suggestion of rose that did not yet dare call itself sunlight. The air carried a cold so clean, it seemed to peel the lungs raw. But for the first time in weeks, there was no acrid scent of burning whites upon it, no faint echo of distant screaming in the wind's low keen. Ravens stirred on their perches, feathers ruffling in impatience, and beneath them, the courtyard lay still, the churned mud of night battle frozen into clumsy sculptures, half-melted swords, snapped shafts of ash, the outline of a giant's boot. Against that tableau of exhaustion stood Sansa Stark, face upturned, hands folded within the sable warmth of her cloak. She breathed the new morning and tasted life where death had reigned, and for an instant, she allowed herself the indulgence of astonishment. They had survived. She had survived. And survival, she was beginning to understand, was not the end of anything but the opening of doors she had never imagined forcing herself to walk through. While she watched icy light seep into corners once claimed by shadow, the great gates groaned on their hinges. A party of men trudged in, cloaks stiff with cold, the crimson kraken of House Greyjoy dragging like dried blood behind Asha. And beside her strode Gendry Baratheon, hair frosted, hammer slung across a shoulder as broad as any memory of Robert. Sansa lifted a hand in greeting. They inclined their heads, as courteous to the Lady of Winterfell as they had been to the broken-eyed boy who had called the storm of the dead to a standstill. Bran lay below in the quiet of the Godswood, attended by Mira Reed and the silence of strange birds. But it was Sansa whose feet had never left the stones. Sansa who had counted the dwindling stores. Sansa who had placed exhausted archers at every breach. The living remembered such things. Within the great hall, the fire still cracked, a stubborn, comforting roar. Around its perimeter, makeshift trestle tables bore platters of dry bread, hard cheese, the last of the carrots dug from frost-rimed soil. Arya sat cross-legged upon the end of one bench, hands busy cleaning needle though it already gleamed, as if her fingers could not yet consent to rest. Nearby Davos Seaworth murmured with Ser Brienne, the pair of them exchanging slow, deliberate words while their gazes flickered often to the door. When Sansa entered, every set of eyes lifted to her with the inevitability of tide. She felt the weight of that collective regard and held herself tall beneath it, but said nothing. She crossed to the high set of chairs, her mother's once, then her own by necessity, and stood behind the seat instead of taking it. Beside her, Tyrion Lannister rose from his place, smoothing the velvets and brocades that hung a little loosely on a frame, thinned by the siege. "They are ready," he told her in a voice pitched for her alone, the edge of some old jest hidden under steady calm. "The lords are frightened, which is useful. Fear, rightly guided, becomes prudence in the blink of an eye. Nesmau. And if fear turns them stubborn?" she asked. Tyrion's mouth quirked. "Then remind them that stubborn lords are of little use to lands still smoldering. Better to place their banners where grain yet grows." The great doors swung wide again. Lord Jon Royce, battered bronze breastplate, befitting a warrior of the Vale, stepped forward. Behind him came the Lady Lyanna Mormont, wrapped in a sable too large for her narrow shoulders, face as pale and fierce as winter moonlight. Glover, Manderley, Tarley, one by one the survivors assembled, each house reduced in number. Each voice needed to weave what fragile semblance of future might follow. They took their places on benches, and none seemed eager to clutter the hush with formal address. The crackle of the hearth filled the hall. The hearth, and the quiet rasp of Arya's whetstone passing across Valyrian steel. When Sansa finally spoke, her voice carried beyond stone columns up into the blackened ribs of the ceiling. "We kept faith with one another and endured the long night," she said. "Yet winter is not done with us. The snowdrifts melt today, but they will come again next year and the year after, and our people must eat through each of those winters. We must plant now, and to plant we need peace that stretches farther than anyone holdfast's walls." Mending done, she let the import of that settle. Even the children of Bear Island understood barley and oats could not sprout in soil trampled by petty feud. After a moment, Lord Tarley rose. lean and straight-backed, the sword Heartsbane slung over one shoulder, like a reminder of what thrummed in his blood despite the sun he'd cast aside. "Words are wind," he said. "Which lord or lady proposes to bind us in that peace? We have no iron throne. King's Landing is ash. The Dragon Queen is gone across the narrow sea to nurse her wounds, if she lives at all. Who will amend the realm?" The echo of his challenge reverberated until even the sparks of the hearth seemed to pause. And then Lyanna Mormont-Child's voice, brittle as rime, carried cleanly through the vaulted hall. "We fought for the North because the North remembered. But the realm would do well to remember the North now. I bend the knee to the Lady of Winterfell. I name her Queen. Nay Dimn." A rustling shudder ran through the benches as men rose or shifted, startled by the audacity of the girl who had scolded them all into battle. Jan Royce drew in a breath that steamed in the chill and expelled it with decision. "The Vale owes its life to the command of Lady Sansa Stark. I will see my knight's vows kept and lend my voice to Bear Islands." One by one, the others followed. Glover, face pinched with grief yet proud. Lord Manderley, great belly shrunk by siege rations but voice booming. Even Lord Jonas Serwyn, whose lands had been torn by White Walkers on the very first night of horror, pressed a knuckle to the floor in homage. When the swell of pledged allegiance quieted, only Randall Tarley remained upright. For a heartbeat his eyes burned with some private misgiving, but at last even he bent, the great sword thudding to flagstone in submission. Sansa did not smile. She inclined her head, the gesture almost grave, as though accepting not a coronet of gold, but fetters of unseen iron. "Then let it be so," she said. And all across the smoky hall blades hissed free of scabbards, held aloft in salute that shimmered with the firelight's hungry dance. That night, the battlements echoed to new hammers rather than distant shrieks. Gendry commandeered the surviving smithy and fed its forge with chunks of weirwood that Bran, in a moment of unfathomable clarity, had decreed spared for this purpose alone. The wood crackled with sap older than castles, burning white, fusing rich bronze and battered gold and shards of shattered swords into the rough circlet that would crown a Stark. Sansa watched from a stool set near the door, cloaked and hooded, her face ruddy from the forge's heat. Sparks flew like fireflies, die-hard heralds of an age not quite willing to dawn. Never forged a queen's crown before, Gendry confessed between strokes of his hammer, sweat tracking black with soot down his temples. Robert's circlet was forged in the south. Too soft, if you ask me. This will hold shape, even if you take a mace to it. Better stacks. Let us hope the realm does not test your craftsmanship that vigorously. He grinned, teeth bright in the glow. Hope you're right. Lost enough good metal to the living dead. Would rather not lose this bit to the living stubborn. She left him to it and climbed the steps of the broken merlons until she stood again above Winterfell. Below, the castle labored. Masons fitted fresh stone. Cooks boiled broth from scrawny hens. Healers tended lines of wounded snaking out of the great hall. She felt each ache, as if her own body were spliced into theirs by invisible thread. The burden was delicious, terrifying, inevitable. A memory surfaced, Cersei Lannister's voice in a garden burgeoning with sweet ladies. Everyone who isn't us is an enemy. How small that world seemed now. For Sansa, every starving child asking bread was us. Every limping soldier was us. Every banner flapping half-torn above a keep that had not yet knelt was us. To rule the Seven Kingdoms, even kingdoms broken, embittered, scorched, would be to hold infinity's jagged mirror and call it family. Dawn of the second day brought wind out of the east, carrying the faint briny tang of White Harbor and rumor of sails upon the narrow sea. Maester Walken unfolded raven scrolls at her command, parchments stiff with the cold of flight. The Prince of Dorne sent congratulations, spiced with gentle reminder that Dorne had not knelt easily even to dragons. The Lords of the Reach, now bereft of Tyrells and scattered in uneasy alliances, begged an audience to discuss grain tithes. Storm's End pledged what strength remained. So long as the Queen's mercy embraced all surviving Baratheon blood, Sansa sealed each reply with dark red wax. The direwolf pressed deep. Tyrion drifted in late morning, wine goblet in hand, though the hour was not one for pleasure. He examined her neat stack of correspondence, brows lifting. "You write swiftly. I have no choice. Every hour we wait, a thing lacking bread grows restless." "I know the feeling," he said dryly, but then his expression sobered. Food is a language kings ignore at their peril. Margaery understood that. Cersei never did. Sansa dipped the quill again and did not bother to glance up. Cersei understood only Cersei. The realm paid the debt of that blind arrogance in blood. "I intend a different ledger." When. At midday she descended to Wintertown wearing only a plain woolen cloak dyed stark gray. Its silver fox trimmed the lone luxury. Guards flanked her, yet kept respectful distance as she moved street to street. Small folk emerged, gingerly at first, then emboldened. They told her of roofs caved under weight of ice, of sisters gone missing in the snowdrifts beyond Saints' Barrow, of babes born too early because of terrors none could name. She listened. She offered simple pledges, supplies where they were scarcest, an earthen wall where the wild winds howled unimpeded. And though she knew promises were too thin to salt porridge, hope kindled behind weary eyes. That evening she convened a smaller council in the solar above the Godswood. Arya sprawled in a chair, boots kicked to the table's edge. Brienne sat ramrod straight near the door, gaze flickering every so often to Podrick, who dozed beside a half-burned candle. Davos nursed a cup of broth, fingers absently tracing the scars where a knuckle once was. Bran's empty chair stood at the head. He would not return to councils, she knew. The weirwood roots had drunk too deep of him, and his guidance came only in cryptic messages whispered by Mera, who transcribed them pale-faced on scraps of bark. Yet, she left the chair unfilled, a shape of silent counsel in wood. The conversation ran late. When finally the candles guttered, Arya rose and stretched like a cat. "You'll do," she muttered, lips quirking in something that might once have been a smile, but now resembled relief. Then she slipped away into the drafty corridors, light on her feet, already half invisibility, and half legend to those who'd walked the world telling children how the girl with needle ended death. Sleep beckoned Sansa in fits and fragments, but before she sought her bed, she returned to the Godswood. She knelt on the carpet of fallen leaves, red upon white, and laid her palm to the cold face of the heart tree. A pulse no human heart could make moved slow beneath the bark, vast as glaciers grinding mountains into silt. She closed her eyes and listened, and in that stillness, a shape formed. Not sight, yet more than simple thought. A great black woman of regal bearing, shoulders cloaked in feathers, voice sonorous beyond memory. The queen who was no queen because the realm had no name for justice in her day. The weirwood sang its endless histories, and Sansa, breath misting, began to understand the price of carrying tomorrow. Word spread south on swift wings. By the time Sansa's column rode from Winterfell, horses thin but eager, banners patched yet proud, the King's Road thrummed with rumor. Some said she commanded ice dragons bred in secret under the wall. Others claimed the North marched only to install a puppet, and then retreat once coin flowed northward like thawed rivers. But more believed the tales of Lady Sansa, who had held her people through the darkest night. Of the direwolf queen who bowed to no southern treachery, yet gave alms to nameless villagers. And believing, they turned out to watch. In the riverlands, women knelt in mud-sodden fields, foreheads pressed to frozen ground. Orphan boys ran alongside the horses until feet bled through broken shoes. Once a half-starved septon limped to the road's edge, lifted a cracked icon of the Seven, and sobbed thanks that any grace at all remained in the world. Edmure Tully met them before River Run's soot-streaked towers. He looked older than Sansa remembered, beard threaded silver, but the warmth in his eyes thawed the distance of years. In the great hall, where once Freys had feasted on the promise of treachery, he welcomed her with bread and salt and a jest about fish and wolves sharing a riverbank. They dined on thin trout stew, while minstrels plucked tentative chords. Afterward Sansa walked the battlements with her uncle. the moon smudged behind traveling clouds. He spoke of rebuilding broken levees, of children born during the siege named for stark courage, of the pain of loyalty kept too long to idols of dust. Sansa listened, felt the tremor of old grief, and said she would ease the Riverland's tax burden first among the kingdoms. Edmure's eyes shone, and though he said nothing, in the curl of his smile she read relief uncoiling like smoke from a snuffed candle. They pressed on. March snow gave way to damp wind scented faintly with budding roses. The reach lay ragged, its golden fields charred, but hints of green dared an appearance along ditches. At Golden Grove, Lady Graceful, Once a lady's maid thrust into rule by absence of blood heirs, approached on trembling legs to place a single sheaf of barley at Sansa's feet. "For the spring," she whispered. Sansa knelt, picked up the sheaf, and wove it into her mare's bridle where it danced against dark mane like a promise. By the time they reached the Trident's forking blue, ravens arrived bearing news that Dorne had assembled envoys to meet in King's Landing. The Stormlands sent a token force with Gendry's sigil, black-antlered stag crowned by a flaming heart, yet Gendry himself rode beside Sansa, gauntleted fist resting often on the crown hidden in his saddlebag. The thing had cooled into a dull burnished bronze, plain of line save 3 blunt daggers rising as points, an echo of direwolf fangs rendered into regalia. Sansa had tried it on only once, in private. The weight felt honest. South of Maidenpool, the King's Road became a scar through wasteland. Hills once quilted in vineyards now bore only stumps of char. Ash drifted on the wind, clogging throats. No birds called. And when at last King's Landing surfaced, a smear of charred silhouettes against steely sea, an involuntary breath caught in every throat. Blackened teeth of toppled towers jutted at odd angles. The Red Keep sagged upon Aegon's Hill, its stones split by some fire deeper than mere flame. The city was alive, but her life was a rasp. Carts creaked over rubble, dogs scavenged, a handful of unsullied patrolled with faces like masks carved in regret. Above all hung silence, where once 1,000,000 heartbeats had thrummed. Grey Worm met them before the shattered dragon gate, helm beneath one arm, armor still immaculate. The commanders behind him bore standards of pale silver, the last echo of a queen lost beyond the sea. His eyes lingered on Sansa, unreadable. Wordlessly he led the party up the cracked incline to the throne room, whose roof had fallen away, where the Iron Throne itself lay melted into a grotesque smear of slag across scorched marble. There, before that ruin, Sansa convened her council. No trumpets heralded, no tapestries fluttered. Instead, Tyrion stepped forward to a low anvil set where the throne steps once began. He drew forth the bronze circlet. "The realm is thirsty," he said softly, voice carrying in the hollow space. "Let it drink from the well of stability." Then he lifted the crown so the broken sun found it. Light sparked off each fang, and the hall hushed as though 100 ghosts caught breath together. Sansa knelt upon ancient soot. Tyrion set the weight upon her red hair, that still smelled faintly of pine smoke and God's wood leaves. When she rose, faces tilted as sunflowers to daylight. Davos knelt first, wooden fingers closed over his heart. Brienne followed, and Podrick, and every northern lord. Then came the Reachmen, the River Lords, the Vale Knights. One by one the Unsullied lowered their spears, until only Grey Worm remained upright, eyes fixed somewhere beyond horizon. At last he dipped his head by the breath of a heartbeat. In that fractional acknowledgement, the 7 kingdoms, such as they were, breathed as one. Sansa walked to the ruined balcony that overlooked a vista of smashed courtyards. She placed gloved hands upon a railing scorched but standing, and looked out upon a city blasted to bones. Below, the small folk had gathered in tense knots, drawn by rumor, by hope, by desperation dulled by too many betrayals. She lifted her voice, let it roll like northern thunder across the broken stones. "I was a hostage child in these walls once," she said. "I learned fear beneath golden lions, and felt the sting of a barbed throne that devoured all who sought to own it. Today I claim no throne of swords, no right born of dragons. I claim only the duty written in the blood of those who stood against death, so children might wake to sunrise. I claim the burden to mend what was torn." She paused. The silence felt alive. "You will not kneel to me. You will stand beside me. Together we will raise houses from ash, plow fields where men once slaughtered brothers, teach our sons the worth of bread and words over blades. The crown I wear is fangs turned inward, reminding me every hour that power bites the bearer first. If I fail you, it will bite again, and you shall cast it from my brow. This I vow." Namtuenin. A murmur rippled, fragile as blown glass, then gathered strength until it roared through the skeletal streets. A sound not of triumph, but of aching, astonished possibility. Somewhere a bell chimed, cracked yet ringing. On the balcony, Sansa felt the crown press upon her scalp, steady as a hand urging her forward. She closed her eyes, inhaled the city's ash and salt and burgeoning spring. And for one heartbeat, she was every Stark before her. Brandon crippled yet unbowed, Eddard noble and doomed, Catelyn fierce in grief, Arya shadow and steel, Jon exile beneath distant snows. She opened her eyes as queen. That night, the council convened in chambers hastily cleared of rubble. Maps unfurled across splintered tables, ink pots balanced on fallen chunks of dragonstone. Sansa listened to the litany of woes: grain rot in the Reach, winter storms wrecking Braavosi trade routes, plague whispering along the coasts of the Stepstones. She described roads to be rebuilt, granaries to be shared, healers to be summoned from Old Town's citadel, and her voice did not tremble. When arguments flared, she met them with measured logic, offering compromise without yielding the core of mercy. Tyrion watched, fingers steepled, eyes narrowed in admiration he no longer bothered to disguise. Close to dawn, a last scroll sealed, Sansa dismissed the council. She lingered alone amid dust and torch glow. The crown lay upon the table now, and she traced one fang thoughtfully. Beyond the open window, the sky bled from violet into pewter. Somewhere down the hill, a rooster crowed, weary but determined. She wondered if King's Landing might ever again smell of baking bread, of lavender, of hot honey tarts sold by carefree bakers. She wondered whether the silence left by dragons could be filled by children's laughter and the hum of looms. She wondered what price the gods would finally demand for a realm stitched back together with hope's thin thread. In the hush of that pre-morning, she lifted the crown once more and set it where it belonged. It did not feel lighter nor heavier. It felt true. Turning, she walked out to meet the first pale rays of a dawn neither old gods nor new could forbid. PGSQL. The city stirred under a gauze of mist that clung to every scorched wall and pitted cobble, softening ruin into something almost gentle. Sansa watched the haze drift past the open shutters of her temporary solar in Maegor's Holdfast, one of the rare chambers where ceiling beams still met walls at their intended angles. Dawn's light spilled in pale and tentative, silhouetting dust motes that spun like slow constellations. Robes of plain gray wool rested across the back of a chair. She donned them in silence and, crownless, stepped into the corridor. Sound carried strangely in the half-hollowed red keep. Each footfall echoed across charred vaults, returned as muffled replies from hallways where tapestries had burned to ghosts of thread. She descended the grand stair that once flowed to the throne room, now a jagged funnel of missing steps and exposed stone. Workers paused at her passing, Tyroshi masons rubbing lime-dry palms on tunics, northern carpenters in rough-spun, a pair of Myrish builders arguing over the pitch of a new arch. She met each curious glance with a nod. Word of her habit of walking the keep before breakfast had already traveled. Men and women made space, respectful but unafraid, as though she were a sturdy lantern in fog rather than a monarch behind armored brightness. Near the bottom landing, someone awaited her, Brienne Tarth, tall as the shattered columns, wearing a breastplate polished to soft glow. Brienne's eyes, blue as midwinter sky, swept the stairwell before lowering in greeting. No obeisance, only a gentle question. "My queen, shall I summon guards?" "Not this morning." Sansa rested a hand on Brienne's forearm, a gesture bred in warmth rather than command. There is something honest in ruin before the day's bargaining begins. I wish to see it plain." Together, they moved through the vestibule, where melted chandeliers still hung like petrified lightning. Outside, the courtyard of Aegon's Hill opened before them. Half its flagstones lay split. Where the great bronze dragon's tail once curled, a makeshift scaffold waited, covered in boards meant for reconstruction. Steam rose from cauldrons of tar, and the smell of resin battled with the ever-present ghost of smoke. At a trestle table, Podrick Payne ladled thick morning stew into chipped bowls for laborers. At sight of the queen he straightened, slopping broth on his boot. His blush warmed the chill air. Sansa accepted a bowl, thanked him, and ate standing amid the workers, savoring onion and sparse barley as though it were feast day fare. When the bowl was empty, she passed it back to Podrick and set off down the zigzag road that led toward the city proper. Brienne kept 2 paces behind, a sentinel yet not a jailer. They crossed beneath the shadow of a toppled tower whose apex still glimmered faintly with heat-tempered stone. Masons had draped green branches over it in token of future rebirth. Beyond lay the market district, once a clamor of vendors, now a patchwork of salvage. Families built lean-tos against half-collapsed walls. Children with soot-streaked cheeks chased one another between piles of rubble. A boy of perhaps 10 darted forward and pressed a wilted daisy into Sansa's hand before vanishing among the hovels. She tucked the stem behind her ear, its faded white petals bright against auburn hair. At the junction where the Street of Flower met the King's Way stood the shell of the Great Sept. 7 ash-blackened arches clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Heat still shimmered in cracked marble that once glowed alabaster. A huddle of silent sisters, few survivors of the faith's cloister, knelt amidst the ruin, murmuring prayer. Sansa approached. Their elder, face lined like wind-furrowed snow, lifted eyes clouded but fierce. Without words, Sansa knelt beside her. The sisters' whispers eddied around her, soft waves breaking on a shore of remembered sanctity. She felt neither judgment nor absolution in their cadence, only persistence. When she rose, she offered no decree, no promise. She simply pressed her palm to the cracked floor and felt warmth still trapped beneath, like hearth ember refusing to die. Brienne cleared her throat gently. The hour turned. Council would gather soon. They retraced their steps past rising scaffolds and carts of fresh lumber hauled by oxen borrowed from half the crown lands. On the hill's slant they encountered Tyrion, cloak thrown over one arm, lips twitching at a private dilemma. "Majesty," he said, falling into stride. "Our Dornish envoys arrived at first light. They hunger, not merely for figs and Dornish red, though those they consume debates, but for assurances. They insist on an audience before midday, or they will withdraw to Sunspear in offended haste." "Let them wait," Sansa answered. "I mean to speak first with the people who reclaim these streets, then with the lords who claim them in parchment." Tyrion chuckled, admiring and weary all at once. "You play a delicate reed pipe. Do not be surprised when adders dance more quickly than honest men." "If they dance," she said, "I shall choose the tune." She took the afternoon in the gardens, or what remained of them, where soot had settled so thick the ground looked perpetually wet even in drought. There she summoned the captain of the Unsullied. Grey Worm arrived clad in armor plain and spotless, eyes that seemed older than winter itself. For a long moment neither spoke. Wind teased the frayed edges of a once silken banner, entangled in blackened rose vines overhead. At last, Sansa broke the hush. "You keep your men stationed at each gate, following shifts devised by your own quartermasters. I have not interfered?" His jaw tightened. "Your lords wonder why we stay. They do. Some fear your departure. Some long for it. Some desire the spears to trade sides." She clasped gloved hands before her. "I wonder what you desire." Grey Worm's gaze drifted across the charred courtyard. "My queen is dead, and yet you guard the city she could not save. We owe debt of liberation." His voice held no tremor, only statement as stark as morning frost. "Slavers across the sea stir again. But this land bleeds. We heal while we await ships. The crown would pay fair wages for unsullied service. Should you remain even part of a year?" She watched him carefully. But coin is not the virtue you value. He shook his head. We serve purpose. A brief flicker darkened his eyes. We serve memory. Sansa considered. Then let the crown offer purpose that honors memory. Lend your ranks to stabilize the crownlands. Train our levies, men and women both, in discipline, untainted by fear or lust. When your ships arrive, no debt will bind you, only respect. And if, in that time, any unsullied soldier chooses to stay, let the choice be his. Des. Grey Worm looked at her fully, measuring something unspoken. Queen offers freedom, not chains. Freedom bought with steel is brittle, she replied. Freedom tended by choice endures. A long breath escaped him, perhaps a sigh. Though unsullied were trained beyond such luxuries. But in its wake he inclined his head. We will speak with captains. Then he turned, stride as precise as sword lines, and vanished among shadowed colonnades. In the council chamber that evening, faces gathered like facets of some wary jewel. Lord Jan Royce, draped in fur despite southern warmth. Lady Maya Stone representing the Val's Hill tribes. Sir Davos with sleeves rolled, ink staining his thumbs. Gendry, awkward in freshly tailored doublet of black and gold. Lady Meredith Crane from the Reach, spare of frame, eyes bright with harvest anxiety. And the Dornish emissaries? Prince Mors Martell's Nyra, and Tyrion chaired the table's end, quill poised like a dagger in miniature. Sansa entered without ceremony and chose to stand. We begin, she said, voice level. Reports. Sir Davos spoke first. Grain tallies, shipments delayed by bandit marauders near Harrenhal, need for fortified wagons. Royce followed with news of a splinter faction north of the Neck, refusing to tithe to any crown south or north. Young warriors proclaiming the winter rebellion from a fastness in the Wolfswood. Gendry reported on forge outputs, mule shoes, and the scarcity of good iron since the mines beneath Casterly Rock had flooded. Lady Crane advocated for canal repair along the Mander to revive river trade. Through it all, Sansa listened, weaving threads of need into tapestry of strategy, neither ornate nor cruel. When Royce finished, she stepped behind his chair, laid a hand on the map, and drew a circle round White Harbor. Lord Manderley sails within a fortnight. His galleys will escort grain barges to Gulltown, bypassing troubled roads. Vale Knights will ride from Gulltown south under Royce banners to King's Landing, escort wagons along the Roserat. This covers Reach grain shortages and Crownland's hunger both. Lord Gendry will divert half his forges to repairing the ferry chains at Maidenpool to hasten shipments by river. Tyrion's quill scratched. Davos nodded approval. Crane pursed thin lips, as if tasting the efficiency on her tongue. Then the Martell twins unfolded parchment, sealed with red wax. Prince Mors extends sandship aid, Nyra announced. Voice velvety, but sharp. 10 sandships bearing citrus, wine, and healing herbs sail north if Crown reduces import tariffs on Dornish goods for 3 years. Murmurs rose. Tyrion arched a brow. Sansa regarded the twins. 3 years is generous. Reduced to 2 with option of third contingent on mutual growth. And I accept. Nyra's eyes glittered. Nymaris' mouth curved. They inclined their heads in synchronized grace. Bargains struck. The council turned to defense. Reports of Ironborn raiders testing coasts near Tarth rattled the chambers. Brienne's voice, low firm, pledged Tarth longships to patrol in tandem with remaining royal fleet under Sir Roland Storm. Sansa approved, tasking Tyrion to free coin by suspending extraneous joust festivals proposed for summer. We rebuild lives before pageantry, she said, and none dissented. Discussions stretched toward moonrise. When candles guttered and scroll pages lay spent, Sansa dismissed the table. Tyrion lingered, riffling parchment. He studied her silhouette by hearth embers. You barter hope with startling thrift, he mused. I barter necessity. Hope must grow of its own accord or it withers. Neberstemmerty. He sipped wine. Many monarchs would rather the people clutch hope, penned and branded with royal seal. Then many monarchs rule ghosts. She walked to the window, stars faint through smoke haze. I lived under such a monarch. Her spell broke the day I fled this city in torn gown and wolf blood on my sleeve. Tyrion's voice softened. I'm crafting letters west to Casterly Rock. Kevin's son Lancel left only infants. The rock is leaderless. The realm will look quickly to you for a lion's chair. Sansa's jaw set. Let the rock lie silent a while longer. Even lions must learn humility. 2 days later, ravens burst across the continent, bearing her decrees. In the north, Lady Lyanna conscripted stonemasons to Wintertown's quarries. Quarried blocks would journey south as gesture of union. In the Riverlands, Edmure Tully's banners marched alongside villages, uprooting weirwood saplings. Gifts to plant in the burned parks of King's Landing. Symbols of shared winters and summers alike. And along the Stormlands coast, mouths of children tasted Dornish oranges for the first time in living memory. Bright sweetness, bleeding away bitterness of salt winds. Amid such motion, intrigue flowered. An autumn-skinned woman named Jaera Voss arrived from Bravos, bearing charter from the Iron Bank, demanding repayment of debts incurred by Cersei Lannister, plus interest compounding quarterly. Tyrion met her with cordial dread, ushered her to negotiation chambers, lined with columns whose capitals had melted into drips. Sansa joined, flanked by Sir Davos, and a ledger thicker than a maester's chronicle of Targaryen madness. Voss wore a smile like a crease in polished wood. The Iron Bank requires certainty, she said. The Seven Kingdoms are uncertain. Certainty is the luxury of those who did not bleed to pay for it, Sansa responded, tone mild. The realm can commit half payment now. Balance within 4 years at interest, scale to harvest yield. Our terms rarely bend. Yet Voss's fingers toyed with the clasp of her ledger. She sensed a steel beneath Sansa's courtesy. A will diamond bright. Tyrion revealed figures showing rapid stabilization of trade. Davos spoke of unprecedented volunteer labor rebuilding the royal dockyards. Sansa referenced the Unsullied's provisional alliance, citing security unmatched since Aerys's reign. At length Voss folded the ledger and tapped its spine. 4 years, he conceded, interest staggered. Provided the crown authorizes an Iron Bank controller to monitor coin flow. Agreed, Sansa said, signing parchment with measured flourish. And should the controller seek to manipulate affairs of governance, remember, this crown bears fangs. Voss almost smiled. The bank appreciates sharp counting. Winter ebbed. White blossoms unfurled on King's Landing's lone surviving almond tree, startling in color against backdrop of charcoal walls. Children hung ribbons from crippled branches, pale green for renewal, gray for memory, crimson streaks for those lost. Sansa, crown on head, walked the streets at dusk and tied a black ribbon of mourning for her mother, a blue for Rickon, a pure white for the direwolf she had loved more than safety. Rumor traveled with her steps. Some whispered she possessed the gift of heart-tree vision. Others swore her hair's red glow at sunset signaled fire magic left by dragon. A bard sang nightly of the dire queen whose shadow grew antlers and whose voice stilled tempests. She ignored myth, attending instead to list. New wells dug, plague huts cleansed, harpsichord strings requisitioned for an orphan choir, newly formed within the dragon pit ruins. Yet not all hearts bent willingly. At the court of Castamere lingered remnants of minor Lannister kin. House Lefford, House Swift, stewing in golden resentment. Word reached Sansa of secret meetings near the ruins of Fair Isle. Tyrion urged caution. A lion without teeth still knows where to bite, he warned. Brienne volunteered to ride west with a detachment. Sansa consented but sent Davos as envoy of peace, hoping Stark candor might lance infection before steel proved necessary. In the Wolfswood tensions simmered hotter. The Winter Rebellion, fed on ale-soaked tales of southern decadence, recruited disillusioned smallfolk dismayed by grey worms unsullied drilling near Deepwood Motti. Lyanna Mormont rode personally to parley. Sansa's raven followed with orders. Extend amnesty, install communal granges, reappoint local wardens chosen by lot among villagers. Weeks later a reply arrived. Lyanna's terse script reporting compliance, rebels dispersing, and a personal note. You rule fairer than snow melts." The girl's scrawl made Sansa smile in weary pride. Spring's Height saw arrival of a fleet from Old Town. Archmaester Ambrose brought texts on crop rotation, accompanied by healers and silent sisters. He bowed to Sansa in the newly glazed throne hall. No iron throne, merely a dais of stepstone veined with marble streaks. "Knowledge serves those who seek it," he told her. "And knowledge of service we bring." She ordered libraries reopened, scribes hired from impoverished scribe houses, and children taught their letters alongside carpentry. In evenings she slipped from state and found Bran in the godswood transplanted to the courtyard of Blackwater Rush. Ash saplings circled the transplanted heart tree. Tenders kept soil damp with river water hauled in bronze pails. Bran sat in wheeled chair woven with elm, eyes milked with symbolism. When Sansa approached, he rarely looked directly. Instead, his gaze drifted toward some horizon behind her shoulder. "The weirwood remembers," he murmured one night as dusk thickened. "It sings of queens crowned beneath shattered ceilings." "Does it warn of what comes?" she asked. "All roads are root and leaf. Some leaves wither, others feed deer that trod elsewhere. The song does not end." She knelt, laid her brow against his knuckles. "But will peace hold?" Bran's breath fogged the evening chill. "Peace is the stillness of lakes between storms. Do not fear the ripples. Fear forgetting the sky upon the water." She understood enough to rise with steadier heart. High summer came shimmering across wheat fields reborn in the Reach. At Golden Grove, Lady Graceful hosted the first harvest moot. Sansa traveled south with a lean retinue. Brienne, Tyrion, Asha Greyjoy, now sworn captain of the royal flagship, and Maester Wolf. They journeyed through valleys where hay wagons rolled under pennants stitched from table linens. Such was the shortage of proper cloth. Yet laughter floated above the creak of wheels. At inns, strangers offered cider poured in chipped goblets. At crossroads, mothers thrust bundles of wildflowers into Sansa's arms until the carriage smelled of sun-warmed fields. The moot unfurled under canvas awnings trimmed with ivy. Farmers testified to seed grants. Shepherds thanked the crown for unsullied patrols that drove off roving sellsword bands from the east. When the last speaker finished, Sansa ascended a simple dais and spoke not of glory but mulch and manure, crop share and dike repair. She pledged timber from the north for house frames, iron from the Vale mines for tools. The crowd roared approval. Some wept openly. That night, bonfires ringed the hills, sparks drifting like drunken stars. Tyrion drank moderate wine and confessed, "You may yet put me out of work. When people no longer need clever men to bend truth, where shall I spend my words?" "On histories," she answered, cheeks lit by a fire glow. "The realm will need honest chroniclers." "Honest? That narrows my prospects." She laughed, sudden and free, and he joined her. But on the journey north, ravens outran them. Jon Snow had returned from beyond the wall. He awaited at Winterfell's gates, hair grown wild, direwolf ghost limping yet fierce at his heel. He had found remnants of free folk colonizing hot springs beneath mountains west of the Frostfangs, had helped them build smokehouses and peat fields. Now he came south with word of a sickness, a wasting cough sweeping children, resistant to elder remedies. When Sansa arrived, their reunion rippled with unspoken weights, but affection triumphed. She embraced him before the assembled watch veterans still guarding the castle, though their oaths had fractured with the wall. They spent nights in the solar long after candles guttered, plotting aid caravans. Tinctures from Old Town, cloth for bedding, smith tools for Blackrocks hammered into stoves. Jon spoke little of ghosts, human or canine. But once on ramparts under starlight, he said quietly, "You bear the crown well." She touched the bronze circlet nested in her braids. "I bear it for all of us," she answered. Summer waned. The realm, though scarred, pulsed with tentative health. Yet across the sea, eyes turned west. Triarchs of Volantis, princes of Korth, new warlords in Slaver's Bay, tested shackles on the wrists of children, and whispered that dragons slept, and Westeros had no armies to cross storms. Ironborn captains, hearing rumor of Eastern coin, weighed anchors. Sansa's spies, newly trained under a Brevosi called Talon, delivered scrolls inked with warnings. Aralor priests, preaching fire conquest. Cell sales congregating at Nugias. In council, debate flashed. Royce pressed for shore batteries along the western coast. Asha argued swift preemptive raids. Gendry urged forging of chain harrows to block Blackwater mouth. But it was Arya, arrived unannounced as ever, face shadowed by wide brim of a Kohoric hat, who spoke calmest. The East knows little of a realm led by wolf instead of lion or dragon. They test fences. Show teeth early, they step back. Sansa listened. She ordered construction of signal towers at Cape Wrath and Bear Island, commissioned 30 river barges retrofitted for coastal defense. To finance, she suspended royal jewelry refurbishment and cut half the coin allocated for tourneys. She dispatched Davos to the Stepstones to broker safe passage for grain convoys, and she sent Arya, under no banner, to Bravos with sealed letter for the Sea Lord, a pact of mutual neutrality and promise of grain trade. Arya took needle and vanished into dawn. Autumn rain swept King's Landing. Ash washed from rooftops, revealing brick the color of wet marmalade. Vine cuttings from Reach nurseries clung to newly mortared walls. In Septa ruins, a choir of orphans sang hymns of 7 faces, reimagined as seasons. Their voices threaded through the city, and passers-by paused, as though hearts called to roost. Grey worms unsullied drilled stevedores in knot techniques for loading ships faster. Laughter sometimes followed commands, translated into halting Westerosi. One rain-slick evening, Sansa walked terraces above the Blackwater. The river glinted pewter, swollen with runoff. Tyrion joined, cloak sluicing water. "You have built a realm on mud and ember," he observed. "But ember can burst into flame under wrong wind." "Then let us shape the wind," she said. He chuckled. "I believe you might." His tone shifted. "A petition comes tomorrow from Grandmother Witch of the Woods. She claims right of high justice over a lord who felled ancient hard trees for lumber. She claims by what law? By the law of stories older than conquerors." Sansa looked toward the godswood transplanted in lower courtyard, leaves turning rust red. Let her speak. Laws born of story bore us all. The next day, the witch arrived barefoot, hair braided with bones of ravens. In the echoing chamber, she stood undaunted by knights and scribes. She presented a sapling, roots wrapped in peat. "Plant this at Trant's crossroads," she commanded, "and blood guilt will wash clean." Sansa weighed the request, considered the bandits haunting that very stretch of road, and decreed it be done. The witch bowed, eyes glittering like onyx pebbles. That night lightning forked a broken tower. Flames licked sky. Unsullied buckets and city watchmen contained blaze before spread. Some muttered of omen. Sansa stood in rain until the last cinder died, crown forgotten on her desk, hair plastered dark to cheeks. She felt thunders rumble inside bones and knew storms would come whether omens or physics summoned them. Winter's first chill crept late, long after memory said it should. When snow finally drifted over Maidenpool, citizens touched flakes as if remembering an old friend's face. Sansa traveled there to inspect the completed chain ferry. Huge ringed links Gendry's smiths had wrought glowing from pits now quenched. She stood upon the barge as ox teams hauled passengers across glassy waters. Children waved from the far bank, cheeks rosy. The captain thanked her with tears sparking in frost. On return to King's Landing, a message awaited. Arya had reached Bravos. Letters exchanged, the Sea Lord receptive. She wrote only 2 lines beyond the official seal. "Water dances still. Do not trust cats." Sansa smiled, puzzled but reassured. The city prepared for winter under banners sewn of blended house colors. A dire wolf quartered with golden rose. A sunburst backed by trout leaping from silver field. Sansa decreed no tourneys, but a festival of lanterns on the long night's anniversary. From every district lanterns rose, paper shells painted with faces of lost loved ones, drifting into the velvet sky. Atop Aegon's Hill, she released her own, painted with direwolf and tulip and a small white dove. Brienne's lantern flew beside, a blue shield on one side, fiery heart on the other. Honor and love. Tyrion's carried quip in high Valyrian few could read. Even dragons fear debts. Lanterns shimmered like distant constellations, mirrored below in Blackwater's ink. People sang, low voices but steadfast. Sansa felt each note vibrate in the bronze circlet. It no longer felt foreign. It felt bone of her bone, iron of her resolve. Winter settled. More snow than ash layered rooftops. Fires burned bright behind windows reglazed with reach glass. Grain stores held. The bells of 7 quarters chimed New Year. On dawn of that year's second day, a raven beat wings against her window. Bran had passed beyond whisper into silence. Mira wrote that he smiled, called her name, then grew still as if the tree roots had finally drawn him home. Sansa folded the letter against her chest. She did not weep then. She donned cloak of gray trimmed fox white and walked into the godswood. Alone. There she knelt beneath the transplanted heart tree, snow drifting into her hair, and spoke ancient words for the dead, thanking Bran for futures he had seen and shape he had allowed the living to carve. That night she called council and danced no preamble. The realm has lost a seer but kept its sight, she said. We honor him by fortune yet to be shaped. Plans unfurled, roads to Skagos, lighthouse on Arbor's tip, schools of healing in each major port. Tyrion proposed silver coinage bearing direwolf on one side, a sheaf of barley on the other. Strength and sustenance entwined. Royce seconded. The council approved. In early thaw, Arya returned breezing across the throne hall, as though months apart were hours. She delivered sealed treaty. Braavos would extend credit at interest lower than iron banks and trade surplus fish in exchange for northern furs. She also brought a cat, lean and gray, rescued from Braavosi docks. It stalked the dais ignoring ceremony. Sansa scooped the creature, felt it rumble purr like distant thunder. She named it Needle's Shadow, to Arya's chuckle. Word came that the Ironborn lords near Fair Isle had signed amnesty in exchange for land grants on the Blackwater to build shipyards under Crown Tack. Davos and Brienne reported success. Lannister cousins bent knee and pledged stone to rebuild trade piers. In small moments, the realm breathed. A tourney field reopened, not for jousts, but for games of children from each kingdom swapping local crafts. Reach boys teaching not die Dornish girls showing how to craft sun shields from woven reeds. Ghost padded through crowds, tail high, accepted scratches behind scarred ears. Sansa often walked at twilight along the ramparts, bronze crown replaced by plain hood. She watched lanterns flicker in windows, heard distant music, pipes and strings recovered from ashes. She felt the pulse of a land once sundered beating now in unison. Not quiet, but harmonious enough. One evening Jon joined her, cloak whipped by north wind. They surveyed the city lights together. It's almost beautiful, he said. Almost. Beauty takes time. You've given it the chance. She leaned on the parapet, snow melting under gloved knuckles. Will you stay this time? He looked outward, voice low. The free folk still need aid. The sickness abates but returns in waves. I could ferry grain north each spring. She nodded. Do that. Carry news too. Remind them the South is not their enemy. He turned to her. And remind the South, the North, never forgot the realm. They hugged, silent but fierce. When he departed at dawn, Ghost trotting ahead, she watched until horse and rider shrank to smudge on white horizon. Years later, bards would argue when precisely the dire queen's peace began. Some said it was crowned in the moment Sansa bent before melted iron. Others claimed it bloomed when lanterns rose over a repaired city. Scribes annotated ledgers with dates, minted coins, chronicled treaties. But for Sansa Stark, Queen of 7 realms stitched from ruin, the dawn she remembered most clearly was the first she walked the battlements of Winterfell after the long night. The taste of frost alive with possibility. Every decision afterward, every compromise and mercy and sharp command, traced its root to that breath. On the eve of her 5th year as monarch, she climbed to the new tower, built over the foundations of Aegon's demolished seat. Tyrion, hair gone fully silver, stood waiting beside a polished telescope gifted by Qarth. He pointed toward the horizon where a new lighthouse blazed at Massey's Hook, guiding ships heavy with spring wheat toward safe harbor. Lanterns glimmered downriver. And above, stars wheeled clear, unmarred by smoke. "To think once I dreaded dawn," Tyrion said softly. She smiled, eyes reflecting starlight. "Dawn is merely the realm's heartbeat we forgot to hear." Far below, in streets paved anew with quarried northern stone, children chased each other between stalls of spice and fish, their laughter rising like wind-borne song. Somewhere, a bard plucked lute strings, shaping tale of direwolf queen and the night she taught swords to plow. In the palace, Brienne sparred with squires too young to remember war. In the God's Wood, a heart tree hummed with history unfolding leaf by leaf. Sansa closed her eyes and breathed. The air tasted of river and pine and distant sea salt. Flavors of kingdoms bound not by chains but by shared dusk and dawn alike. Beneath crown of molten fangs she carried weight and wonder both, and in her pulse echoed the steady refrain of a people mending. Not finished yet unbroken, not perfect yet whole, and moving always toward morning. Ni, Ake, PGSQ, El Poir. A fresh November wind rolled across King's Landing from the burned hills beyond the Blackwater rush, bringing with it the chill tang of distant snows and the creak of half-mended shutters all along the street of silk. Dawn's paling sky showed faintest silver behind scudding violet clouds, and thin light laid itself like watered silk upon slate roofs, newly retiled from Duskendale quarries. Sansa Stark stood on a narrow balcony that jutted from the solar she had claimed in Maegor's Holdfast, palms resting upon cool stone, her cloak's hood down so the breeze could worry loose auburn strands from the coil at her nape. Below, the first bell of matins tolled in the orphan-run sept, the notes soft and unsure, as though the bell ringer still learned the rhythm of worship. She closed her eyes and counted the peals. 7, one for each face, as was proper again now that the faith had consented to share sanctuary with heart trees and desert gods and the red priests who lit braziers each dusk upon the hill of Rhaenys. What had once been ash-black ruin had steadied into the purposeful clamor of renewal, yet every renewing carried its cost, and this day would demand more coin than any coffers held. Footsteps sounded in the corridor, quiet, measured, armored by habit rather than steel. Brienne of Tarth appeared at the threshold, sword belted over a padded gambeson the gray blue of storm seas. "My queen," she said, half a bow, half a worried frown. "The Triarchy envoys have anchored off Driftmark. Sir Adam Valerian has sent a swift cutter. He begs audience before council convenes." Sansa nodded, gaze still on the river's shimmer. The Triarchy, a new union of Volantis, Newgaze, Tyrosh, and fragments of Yunkai rising from old slaver ruins. For 3 quiet years, their emissaries had issued cordial letters. Then, a month after harvest, their ships began to seize Carthene spice barges and Braavosi fishing cogs. Now they floated a fleet inside Blackwater Bay's outer arms, courteous but massive, as though the sea itself had consented to wear a mailed fist. "Have Velaryon shown to the small hall?" she said. "Wake Lord Davos and Lady Crane. I want Gendry's maps on the table before the first envoy's boot touches our quay." Brienne dipped her chin, then hesitated. "The people. They've heard rumors. Crowds have begun to gather in Shadetree Square." "Let them gather," Sansa answered. "I will speak to them before sunset." The door swung shut, leaving her alone with dawn. She drew a breath that tasted of cold river and faraway pine and wondered, as each morning since the crown first settled on her hair, how many such breaths remained before the fangs of bronze bit too deep to free her. Then she turned inward to the day's work. The small hall still smelled faintly of tree resin from the new paneled walls. Tyrion leaned already over charts spread across the long oaken table, hair silver in a halo around his broad brow, fingers drum-tapping where colored stones marked shipping routes. Davos Seaworth, gray-bearded and hawk-nosed, stood nearby with a ledger clasped to his chest. When Sansa entered, both men straightened. A nervous page shut doors behind. "Lord Adam will arrive within the hour," Tyrion said without preamble. His raven mentioned spyglasses, sighting 8 Dromons flying the striped harpy of New Geese. Their oars churn like carpenter's saws. "Ben Enderbo." Davos laid the ledger down, opened it with calloused care. Trade yields are strong enough to feed 2 sieges, but gold reserves thin if we hire the Golden Company outright. We will not, Sansa decided. Sell swords follow coin, not cause. We need allies whose homes lie beneath the same sky as ours. She touched a fingertip to the narrow sea, slid it north to the heart-shaped bay of Bravos. The Sea Lord's envoys depart tomorrow with 30 casks of arbor wine. Increase it to 40, and add a promise. We will grant Bravosi captains recessed docks free of tariff should they patrol our northern sea lanes at cost. Them Topsim. Tyrion's lips twitched. A bargain of harbor stone for sword arms. Cheap, if pride can swallow tariff exemptions. Pride has no stomach, Sansa replied. Let it starve. A herald's trumpet sounded beyond the shuttered lattice. Lord Adam arrived cloaked in drift blue samite, sea salt still glimmering on his boots. He bowed, eyes earnest beneath the silver-white streaks his green hair had gained since assuming Driftmark's lordship. Grace, he greeted, voice as low as hull timbers in swell. The Triarchy sent a tender ahead of their fleet. They request parley at the gullet in 3 days' time. If refused, they will levy tolls on every ship bound for the narrow sea, ours included. On what authority? Davos demanded. Adam's shoulders lifted a fraction. They claim salvage rights for keeping these waters free of corsairs. They name themselves Wardens of Trade. Tyrion barked a dry laugh. Wardens, is it? Triarchs who'd shackle the world again. Sansa's expression scarcely shifted. If we meet them at the gullet, do they guarantee safe passage? Their message swears by the blind god of Norvos and the burning heart of R'hllor both. Oaths to every god and so to none, Davos muttered. She considered, gaze on the map's wide mouth of river and sea. We will attend, but not alone. Lord Adam, have your swiftest sloop bear ravens to Sisterton, White Harbor, Gulltown, the Arbor, Sunspear. Each lord with ships enough to sail sends one bannered vessel to stand at our side. Peacefully, for parley only. Let the Triarchy witness a realm unbroken. Now, Adam bowed again, relief warring with worry in his eyes. It will be done. When he left, Sansa sank onto the new-hewn chair at the table's end. Tyrion watched her, one brow arched. You plan a gallery of flags, he observed. Not a fleet of war. Admirably theatrical. Theater's often cheaper than war, she answered. Inshal. The next 2 days coiled tight as bowstrings. Gendry's forges rang from pre-dawn past moonrise, shaping rivets, anchor flukes, spare links for the ferry chains. Asha Greyjoy supervised loading of pitch casks and fresh water onto the royal flagship Honor of Winter. In winding alleys, whispermongers traded stories that the dead had risen again in the east, that dragons hatched upon the smoking sea, that Queen Sansa meant to wed a Triarch to seal peace. She permitted rumors to roll unchecked, better fretful speculation than mutinous certainty. On the afternoon before departure, she walked cloaked to Shadetree Square. Clouds bruised the sky purple-gray, and the crowd pressed thick, faces sharp with hunger for reassurance. She climbed the base of an old statue, the maiden, shattered at waist, lifted gloved hands, and the murmurs stilled. 5 winters ago, she began, voice steady without herald's spell. We stood upon broken stone and wondered whether dawn would ever return. It did, because we stood together then, as we do now. A new fleet has come from the east. They speak of tolls and tribute. I go to meet them so you may stay at hearth and market. If they seek friendship, we will share bread and salt. If they seek chains, they will learn the North remembers. And so does Dorne, and the Reach, and every heart that beat the night the dead came. Keep faith with one another 3 days more, and I will come home with peace or with warning. But I will come home. Then they'll now be. Wind carried her words outward. Somewhere in the press a voice shouted, "The Wolf Queen." Another answered, "Fangs forward." Bystanders thrust torches high, though it was noon and no flame needed, but the firelight sparked in hundreds of eyes, fierce. She climbed down, felt hands brush her cloak hem. A blessing, a plea, and let them. When she emerged, Brienne waited, unsmiling but proud. It was enough, Sansa said quietly. It was everything, Brienne corrected. Wah. Dawn of the Parley found Blackwater Bay a plain of beaten bronze under raked sun. Honor of Winter led the column, her sails dyed muted wolf gray. Her prow carved into the snarling direwolf Gendry had shaped from driftwood, hardened by pitch. Beside her glided the arbor wineship Myrtle Maiden, under green grape leaf standard. Behind followed a Manderley galley white-hulled as a swan, a Gulltown cog, a Sisterton longboat, a lean Dornish sloop with scarlet lateen. Each bore minimal crew, each decked in ceremonial armor. But aside from crossbows behind shields, no heavy weapons showed. Sansa stood at Honor's starboard rail, Brienne to her right, Tyrion to her left, armed only with wit and a thin-bladed dagger none had ever seen used. The Triarchy host appeared beyond two low islets, hulls black as nightmare, sails striped red and blue and gold, bowsprits shaped into open-mouthed harpies clutching broken chains. Their flagship, a massive, three-masted Drummond, slowed by dropping storm anchor. Rowers shipped oars in unison. A gilt barge detached, lacquered black, roofed with crimson silk awning. Drummers beat slow heartbeat cadence as it approached. Gangplanks met in mid-water, a clever platform rigged by Valyrian shipwrights. Sansa, Brienne, Tyrion stepped onto it. From the barge emerged three figures. A Taroshi noble, swathed head to toe in patterned silks. Only kohl-rimmed eyes visible. A Volantine Triarch in lacquered scale armor of purple glaze, and a tall woman wearing sleeveless robe of red cotton, her arms spiral tattooed with Kiskari glyphs. Behind them padded two pale eunuchs guards, holding spears of razor-edged obsidian. Formal bows exchanged, they knelt upon painted cushions. The Volantine Triarch, older, sly-eyed, began. Queen Stark, we honor your courage sailing thus, though so few warships shield you. We sailed under banners of peace, Sansa replied. May we speak in that spirit? The Tyroshi's voice hissed through silk. Peace rests on secure trade. Our convoys have lost revenue to Stepstone pirates emboldened by your realm's lack of patrol. Tyrion's brow lifted. Stepstone pirates targeted our grain fleets as well. We captured two corsair captains last month. Both Taroshi sell sails formerly in Triarchy employ. Their ledgers stamped with your own sea tax seal. Manning. The Tyroshi's hand twitched. The Giscari woman smiled thin as a lash. Accidents of allegiance. Let us settle debts cleanly. You will grant Triarchy tithes on all traffic to Bravos, and the Shivering Sea, 1 gold stag per ton, half stag per passenger. In return, we guarantee safe passage. Davos inhaled behind Sansa, plain rage, yet kept his place. Sansa folded her hands. Your offer is husk empty of grain. These waters fed Westeros before old geese first planted a harpy standard. We will not pay tribute to trade our own shores. And Neprand. Then our fleet remains, the Giscari said softly. Tolls will be taken by force. If that sparks war, blood paints the waves. Not ours alone. Silence. Gulls cried overhead. Sansa studied the woman's glyph-inked arms, the calm conviction in her dark eyes. A conqueror beneath courtesy. She glanced sideways. The Dornish captain on Scarlet Heron tapped twice upon railing. A prearranged signal that their lookouts counted more Triarchy warships northeast. An ambush if talks failed. Sansa breathed once, twice, then spoke. The North bows to no such extortion. But the North also does not fling men to drown when words may yet weave bridges. I propose joint patrol accord. Triarchy escorts its own trade caravels north, while our galleys guard them within Westerosi waters. Any pirate seized is tried by mixed tribunal aboard a neutral platform at sea. Profits seized from convicted raiders fund widows. Coffers seized from convicted raiders fund widows' coffers. The Triarch laughed, a brittle tinkle. You would dictate? Your fleet shows 7 ships. Ours number 8 times 8 tall wide. Now, Tyrion leaned on his cane. All fires start with but one spark. Should your war galleys blockade our narrows, ravens will wing to the Eyrie, to Sunspear, to Old Town. Before winter's first snow, you'll face a realm whose sons once fought ice itself and won. His dark gaze fixed them. Ice devours more than flesh. It devours fear. Do you truly wish to test hearts that already survived the end of the world? The Giscari's composure wavered. A flick of lashes. The Tyroshi murmured with the Volantine. Oars dipped, steadying their barges as tide shifted beneath the platform. Finally the Giscari inclined her head. You bargain fiercely, Queen of Wolves. We will consider joint patrol proposal, but tithes shall be levied on ships bearing Bravosi registry alone. They are no vassals of yours. Nor of yours, Sansa returned. Negotiate with Bravos at Bravos. Here we decide only what regards these shores. Withdraw your warships to the line of the stepstones until accord signed. Remain closer and our coast banners will regard you foe. Moments stretched taut. Sea breeze rattled awning strings. Then the Volantine Triarch offered thin-lipped smile. Let council weigh merits for 3 days. We shall anchor east of Driftmark meantime. So ended the parley. As they withdrew, Tyrion exhaled slow. A dance of claws, averted. Not averted, Sansa answered. Delayed. We must rouse allies swifter than Triarchy weighs its pride. Wind. Ravens blackened sunset skies as if dusk itself unraveled into feathers. Messages flew. To the Vale for mountain bowmen, to high gardens regrown orchards for silver to hire Bravosi fire ships, to White Harbor for hard-eyed whalers who knew how to ram leviathans. A courier overland to Sunspear rode poisoned horses to deliver sealed orders for Dornish sand skiffs, to harry the Triarchy's supply lines. Within King's Landing, the mood shifted, not panic, but a vigilant thrum. Armorers hammered brigandines day and night. Potters retooled for pitch jars. Stable hands plated ship rigging instead of reins. Yet, no forced levies marched through streets. Sansa decreed bounties for volunteers only, with stipends paid to their kin in advance. Bread lines lengthened not from famine, but because men and women queued to sign sea service rolls, where warm loaves were given with parchment. One night in the lantern-lit courtyard, Arya appeared silent as frost beside Brienne. Cats whisper strange things, she said, offering a scroll smelling of sea brine. It bore the Sea Lord's broken wax. Bravos agreed to patrol the shivering sea approaches and deliver 10 arbalist-armed dramans to White Harbor under Northern Charter. In return, they would receive the tariff exemptions Sansa promised, plus rights to build a counting house at Maidenpool. Sansa smiled, thanked her sister, and asked whether the faceless rumor of an assassin pledged to slay the queen still seeped through Bravos. Arya winked. If such a rumor lives, it lacks a head already. Plans accelerated. Gendry supervised mounting scorpions salvaged from Qyburn's old labs onto new swivel bases. Brienne oversaw drills with mixed units, unsullied spear and veil shield, locking into newly devised wall of iron and bronze. Davos charted supply routes circumventing stepstone ambuscades. Even Tyrion rode north to inspect Winterfell's forges, complaining of saddle sores but returning with carts of northern frost steel blades tempered hard. On the eve before Triarchy's answer was due, snow flurried over the bay. Sansa stood again on her balcony, watching powder settle onto balustrade, melt, vanish. She felt the pulse beneath the stone. The city's restless heart. Heavy footfalls approached, Gendry's unmistakable, yet she kept her gaze outward. The first flakes, he said beside her. Always liked how quiet they make the world. Like hammers stopping mid-swing. A false hush, she answered. The forge keeps heat no matter snow. He leaned elbows on parapet. My lady, if battle comes, your place is not at prow of honor. Let me command. You command the forges. I command the realm. He ground a heel. I forged that crown so it would shield you, not drown you. She turned, softening. The crown shields by standing where strike must fall. I will not ask men and women to risk waves when I hide behind castle walls. Gendry opened his mouth, thought better. Instead, he reached into coat, withdrew a small object. A ring of beaten bronze banded by 3 notches like wolf fangs. Take it, he said. If the sea swallows towers and crowns alike, This should at least keep your hand warm. She slipped it on. The fit snug. Metal cool on skin. Thank you, she whispered. When? The Triarchy's answer came with wind off the east, tearing banners on ramparts. Their fleet accepted joint tribunal, but demanded staging island rights in Blackwater Bay. Sansa refused, counter-offered neutral sandbars south of Garrick Point. Negotiations valeed by Ravenspan 3 weeks. While scribes inked letters, sailors trained ballista crews, carpenters reinforced quasides. The city learned to hold its breath without choking. Finally, parchment arrived bearing 2 seals. Triarchy accepted withdrawal to Stepstones. All toll suspended for 10-year term. Mixed patrol schedule ratified first convoy to sail under combined colors come early spring. The bells rang thrice when the news was read. Folk poured into streets, clattering pots, embracing strangers. Relief rose like steam from fresh bread. Yet Sansa did not order celebration. She summoned council. Victory rests on quill, not sword, she said. But the quill's ink is still wet. We must press advantage. Weave alliances ironclad before the Triarchy's pride rehardens. Her finger tapped map near the summer sea. We sail an envoy to an iron. Free city now, needing trade for timber. We send miners to Skagos to cut stone for new breakwaters. We complete the lighthouse chain along the eastern coast, so fleets may signal within minutes. Tyrion rubbed weary eyes. Will the people bear more tax levy? No levy, she replied. We fund with interest payments from the Iron Bank's own comptroller, whose ledgers show crown surplus beyond projection, thanks to our grain exports. She slid a separate parchment across. Numbers verified this dawn. Tyrion studied them, a slow grin blooming. The lion bites its tail. The realm bites no one, she corrected. It feeds itself. No. Winter deepened. Frost laced vines in the restored royal gardens. Oranges from Dorne hung in glasshouses warm with braziers. Sansa spent dark mornings drafting decrees on land grant reforms. Freeholders to hold their own acres, lords to retain grazing rights only by investing in mills and bridges. Some protested. Letters flowed heavy with wax seals cracked in anger. She answered each with patient logic. Hungry tenants rebel, quicker than well-fed free folk. By solstice, even House Lefford grudgingly consented. Snow muffled the world for 12 days. Children fashioned direwolf effigies, not dragons, in white drifts. On the longest night, orphans' choir sang beneath the heart tree, voices weaving old gods' wordless homage with the Seven's lullaby. Sansa listened hidden among pillars, the crown left behind on writing desk, yet she felt its weight upon her brow all the same, a promise and a brand. At year turn, Brienne rode north to Tarth to oversee ship grapples installation. Davos accompanied to treat with Storm's End about cedar shipments. Gendry remained, forging riveted keel plates. Tyrion traveled to Old Town to lecture archmaesters on value of commoner tongue reading lessons. Arya vanished again. Rumor had her hunting an assassin circle in Lys. Sansa ruled with smaller court, filling nights reading Bran's old parchments on winds and roots, seeking patterns in realms' subtle tremors. One snowy morning, a raven from Skagos reported miners had broken through volcanic seam, revealing obsidian lodes vast as the caves under Dragonstone. Obsidian, dragon glass, once weapon against Night's King, now commodity prized by healers and lens grinders. Sansa ordered immediate export safeguards, half to crown storehouses, half to free market with price caps. She dispatched a letter to the Citadel inviting scholars to study seam stability. Realm's wealth found yet another vein. But prosperity draws wolves of different pelts. Cross Summer Sea, Qarth's 13 feuded. One faction sought exclusive dragonglass license. They sent envoys offering rubies the size of quail's eggs. But Sansa refused monopoly. Spurned, they financed pirate syndicates raiding northbound cargoes. Reports of smoldering merchant hulks reached King's Landing. Thus, quiet war smoldered again on horizon. This time, Sansa preempted. She sent Asha with fleet of 8 longships, each carrying maester engineers whose smoke pots could shroud hulls like fog. They ambushed pirate flagships at midday when sun-blinded lookouts, boarded with unsullied marines. Within a fortnight, Stepstone's harbors littered with charred triremes. Pirate war ended before most northerners learned it had begun. Letters of gratitude arrived from Qarth's rival faction, and an invitation. Attend the Dragonbone Symposium, where scholars across known world would debate last century's ruin and rumor of surviving eggs. Tyrion urged attending. Knowledge as currency. Sansa weighed risk. Travel long, storms frequent, triarchies truce young. Yet vision of realm bound by glass and grain rather than steel pulled her. She appointed Brienne as regent and sailed south aboard the swan-hulled Lady's Grace with Gendry, Arya, who appeared just as lines cast off, and Maester Wolkan. The voyage carved half a year, past the turbulent straits, rounding the summer isles bright with jungle waterfalls, up the Jade Straits where sea turned turquoise under flying fish leaps. They arrived at Qarth's triple-walled opulence in heat that tasted of cinnamon and sun-baked limestone. Caravansaries draped with silks greeted them, and amid perfumed courtyards the symposium unfolded. Lectures on Valyrian masonry, demonstrations of wildfire distillation, debates whether dragonfire could temper steel beyond known limits. Sansa listened more than spoke, learning of sea silk sails woven by far Ibonese, of leviathan bones carved into ballast keels, of a new glass sharper than any obsidian shipped by free-folk artisans. Gendry bartered forging secrets for samples. Arya slipped among shadowed arcades gathering rumors of slave rebellions in Astapor. Wolkan copied scrolls of lost maesters containing crop rotation suited to volcanic soil. On the symposium's final evening, a hooded stranger sought audience. He presented a sealed casket of ebony. Inside lay an egg, small, mottled green-black, warm to touch. A gift, he whispered, from the shadowlands where night is born. To the queen who turns fangs inward, that life may hatch outward. Before guards could seize him, he vanished into incense-thick crowd. They studied the egg under lamplight. Maester Wolkan's lens revealed hairline cracks pulsing faint ruby. Heat radiated like sleeping ember. Gendry reached, but Sansa stopped him. "Some fires wake the dead," she murmured. "Let us carry it home and decide in council." In their return voyage bore omens. A red comet streaked northern sky 3 nights running. Dolphins escorted hulls, then vanished sudden as candles snuffed. One dawn Arya found dark feathers on deck arranged in spiral rune that matched glyphs tattooed on Kaskari envoys' arms. No crew claimed knowledge. When they reached Blackwater Bay midsummer, they found city changed yet steady. New spires rose where Sept once lay, glazed with riverstone mosaic. Obsidian-shod breakwaters sparked sunrise. Brienne met them at dock, smile crinkling scar. "Realm stands," she reported. "Triarchy quiet, though rumors speak of their captains lost in squall off Basilisk Isles. Braavosi counting house triples profit forecasts, and Grey Worm's men depart come first frost, leaving 50 brothers who choose to stay." Sansa touched the circlet on her brow. It felt heavier, as if the egg's warmth seeped through decks into metal. She moved it aside, wiped sweat, replaced it. That night, council gathered. Wolkan spoke of hatchling probabilities. Tyrion of danger should dragon rise without rider loyal. Davos worried for grain stores if dragonfire scorched fields. Arya voiced desire to ride wind again, a wink at myths. Gendry said nothing, studying the egg's glow. Sansa listened until voices spent. At length she said, "We forged this peace without dragons. We will not rest future upon their wings. The egg will remain sealed beneath the citadel where maesters may learn. But it shall not hatch while I rule." Devon. Some sighed relief. Some blinked surprise. She closed casket, passed key to Brienne. Decision made. Yet decisions birth consequences. Unseen. Word leaked. Always does. Across the sea, in slaver pits of Marine, priests of the pyre god proclaimed prophecy. Dire queen cages flame, darkness will claim sun. Triarchy hawks found cause. They spread tales that West Realm hoarded dragons anew. Ships stirred in sigil-painted harbors. Through autumn, Sansa strengthened watchtowers, increased joint patrol frequency, convened harvest festival to ensure trust between kingdoms did not fray under rumor's scythe. Lanterns rose again, dotting skies. Ghost romped snow-dusted courtyards, grier now but unbowed. Children recited new rhyme. Wolf Queen, Wheat Queen, Snow and Seed Deji. She plants her oath before her deed. She felt years in her bones sometimes. Still not yet 40, but gaze already measuring decades. She thought of Bran's murmur, "Do not fear ripples," and watched ripples spread from each pen stroke she made. Winter after the voyage proved gentle, roads passable into first month. On New Year's feast, Tyrion presented her with bound tome, the ledgers of renewal, detailing laws, yields, skirmishes, accords since long night, closing chapter blank for her to ink. She laughed, kissed his brow, and promised to fill pages. But before ink dried, ravens beat midnight glass with freezing wings. Asha's patrol sighted Triarchy iron-plated behemoth north of Stepstones, bristling with scorpions the size of siege towers, towing siege barges. Behind, 30 Dromons, headed not to Westeros, but southeast toward the Enenethi Straits, waters now patrolled by Westerosi-flagged relief ships and Enebethi-bombed traders. If seized, Sansa's pledge to free isles would fracture, realms' honor tarnish. Council lights flared before dawn. Maps unfurled again, coffee replacing wine at lips. Strategies argued. Send fleet. Risk open war. Rely on Bravosi synergy. Sansa rose, ringed fingers pressed on table. We sail to Neneth, but this time with message of more than banners. If Triarchy sees only ships, they weigh metal. If they see men and women defending healing isles for no coin, they weigh blood. Blood weighs heavier than gold. Nistuma. She called levy of volunteers, healers, septons, silent sisters, even singers. Ships filled with grain and balm, archers and builders. Ghost leapt aboard flagship as if sensing story's next turn. 3 weeks later, they met Triarchy just beyond Endatha's coral reefs. Sansa's convoy spread wide. Green-cloaked archers on weather decks, white-robed healers visible beside them. No hiding weaponry, but no aggression in sails. Asha guided honor to arrow-shot range, dropped anchor. Sansa stood in plain wool surcoat, crown stowed below. She hailed enemy flagship through brazen trumpet. No tribute, no toll. Only sanctuary. Harm these isles and wind and wave will fight you. The Triarch Admiral answered with silence first. Then one catapult stone hurled wide, pluming water far astern. But unseen reefs nag heavy hulls, currents swirl treacherous, and upon beaches thousands of Enyi with butterfly marks on cheeks gathered, holding torches like constellation come earth. The Admiral beheld no gold to seize, only people ready to burn boats rather than bolt. Dawn reddened horizon. Triarchy turned sails, withdrew. Not a shot loosed after. Victory without battle once again. When Sansa returned, streets of King's Landing erupted in cheers, though many scarcely understood where Eneath lay. They understood only that the queen who wore fangs inward had kept blood from staining sea. On Winter's last evening she walked Godswood, felt snowmelt drip from heart tree leaves. She spoke soft. "We are mending, little by little." Wind answered with hush through branches, perhaps Bran's echo, perhaps only breeze. She smiled, rested forehead to bark, and for heartbeat felt roots of tree pulse with realms throbbing life. She left Godswood, climbed rampart, gazed sweeping city of lanterns and smoke, spires and river, far farms under moon. Crown shimmered bronze about her temples, though no torch lit it, and she carried it not as iron yoke, but as circlet grown of her own will. All night, she remained upon wall, watching stars. Near dawn she whispered, vow, to guide her people through storms yet unseen. Below, bakers' ovens fired first loaves, smell of crust and sesame curling skyward. Somewhere a newborn cried into morning. Trumpets would soon announce her day's audiences. Petitions would pile. Ravens would land. Yet for a final breath, she simply watched sunrise burn vapors gold, knowing peace, hard-won, imperfect, but living, stretched across kingdom like fresh-sown field. And she would guard it as fiercely as any dragon might its own heart flame, so that children unborn might one day inherit a world where crowns no longer needed fangs at all. Be gay. Or a single gust rattled the leaded glass panes in the queen's solar, and Sansa's quill paused above the parchment. All around her the Red Keep murmured with winter's voice, wind in every crack and crevice, snapping loose banners in the outer yard, whistling through fresh chiseled murder holes in the broken teeth of the gatehouse. The city below slumbered fitfully. Streets lit by scattered lanterns, the great bells silent for the first time since the Triarchy's retreat. She set down her pen and flexed cold, stiffened fingers, eyes drifting to the window where a haze of snow blurred the edges of lantern light, turning the city into a field of uncertain golds and grays. On her desk, the latest messages from Sunspear and the Eyrie lay weighted by a stone carved with the wolf's head sigil. Gendry's new chainmail samples glinted on the corner. Arya's latest coded note, 5 syllables about cats, black sails, and the price of trust, waited beneath a sprig of winter rose. She drew the rose to her face, inhaling its sharp green cold, and let herself remember a different winter in a different keep. Those years felt both close and impossibly distant. The memory of a girl who had once wished for songs and tourneys, not snow-laden petitions and dawns blurred with sleepless worry. Yet the city did not stop because its queen recalled childhood. Every hour the pulse of the realm found her. A runner arrived at dawn with news from Gulltown. The first merchant ships of spring already clustered beyond the ice floes, hulls heavy with tin and fish and blue dyes for the coming year's festival. At the same hour, Brienne and Podrick supervised the changing of the gate guards, and Ghost, ancient now but still limber, made his patrol of the battlements, children trailing him with scraps and stories. Tyrion, always earlier than the light, joined Sansa for breakfast. Cheese, black bread, a thin soup of beans and bacon. The Braavosi envoy arrived with less gold and more questions, he announced between spoonfuls, his gray hair wild about his temples. They have heard the Sea Lord's counting house is too prosperous for the crown's own liking. He wishes to know if tariffs will be raised at the summer council. Nameti. Tell him tariffs remain as last agreed, and he may visit the granaries at Maidenpool himself to witness their stock, Sansa replied, wrapping her hands around her cup for warmth. Honest grain is the best answer to suspicion. Honesty is rarely enough to satisfy Braavosi pride. Tyrion's mouth quirked. Still, I will tell him. It's good policy, and better for digestion than another round of sweet lies. The council assembled by mid-morning. Davos entered last, bearing a sheaf of charts. Storm damage along the western coast, reports of salvage from the Triarchy wrecks, and news that the Enneathi had begun exporting bomb in casks bound with Skagosi iron. Gendry discussed expansion of the city's foundries, using new obsidian shipments to craft glass for lanterns, arrowheads, and healers' knives. Lady Crane from the Reach described the latest test fields, a golden band of barley already sprouting in the shadow of Blackwater's new breakwaiters. Even Maester Walken seemed almost optimistic as he delivered a treatise on the decline of fever deaths among children, crediting clean water and longer stores of lemon root. As each voice rose and fell, Sansa guided the conversation, redirecting anger, smoothing envy, prizing honest disagreement over forced unity. Her gaze traveled from counselors to map and back again, always measuring, always listening. The matters that could not be solved now were written in her neat hand and left for another dawn. Afternoons, when the air warmed slightly and the sun broke through, Sansa would ride out beyond the walls, accompanied only by Brienne, Arya, if she was home, and on rare days, Jon Snow himself. These rides took her through fields where children rebuilt snowmen into direwolves, where the new granaries cast long blue shadows, where laborers and lords alike stopped to doff hats or bow in her direction. Sometimes the children called after her, Queen of Snow, Queen of Wheat. She would laugh and wave, Brienne smiling shyly at her side. Jon rode with an ease that belied the scars winter had left him. You have given them hope, he said one afternoon as they watched the city from a low hill, frost sparkling on every roof. Hope is harder to manage than fear. In the end, it breeds expectation, and expectation never ends. It's what we all hope for, she replied. When the long night came, that there would be something after, something worth living for. He nodded, silent, eyes on the horizon. The North will always be yours, Sansa. Even if the day comes when the South forgets. Memnon, the North is mine because I remember what it took to keep it, she said, voice low. Not because I wear a crown. He smiled, rare and genuine. That's why you are queen. He departed again not long after, this time escorting a new convoy of maesters and silent sisters to the lands beyond the wall. Arya slipped away too, leaving only a feather from one of Ghost's ruffs, and a note written in the language of Bravos, both a farewell and a promise to return. The city braced for spring. The Lantern Festival, once just a vision, became a living thing. Candles and glass globes hung from every window and tree, children crafting wolf heads and dragonflies to float above the streets. Brienne organized the first tournament of archery and horses since the dragon's burning. Banners from every kingdom fluttered, sun and spear, trout leaping, a golden rose, and the new standard of the realm, a direwolf couchant beneath a field of barley and blue sky. At the festival's height, Sansa took her place on the newly rebuilt steps of the Red Keep, the bronze circlet set upon loose hair. The people flooded the square below, thousands pressing close to hear her words. Ghost sat at her feet, white fur shining. She raised her arms for quiet. This realm stands not because of crown or coin or dragon, but because of the hands that work it, the hands that fight, that plant, that heal. We are many peoples, many tongues, but we are one hope. Let no man or woman say the long night broke us. We broke it, and so long as we remember that, we will never fall to shadow again. The cheers rolled up the hill like thunder. Lanterns soared, flickering gold and orange, and the bells chimed out for the living and the lost. As night deepened, Sansa wandered the gardens alone. Lantern light cast her shadow long across new grass, dew shining on every blade. The air smelled of new growth and river mist, and she paused beneath a heart tree transplanted from the north, its leaves pale and fluttering. She pressed her hand to the bark and let her mind wander, through pain and loss, through hunger and fear, through triumphs that left no easy joy. The old gods whispered nothing, but she felt comfort in their silence. Perhaps peace was not the absence of worry, but the knowledge that the world could heal in small ways, again and again. Days grew longer. Ships arrived from Sunspear, bringing oranges, wine, and the first exotic silks. The Dornish princess rode with the convoy, seeking audience to discuss a marriage alliance. Her younger brother and a northern cousin, perhaps, or Gendry Baratheon and a Tyrell of Highgarden's new line. Sansa received her with hospitality, but with measured caution. The realm would need every friendship it could earn, yet she would not barter away what made it strong, the freedom to choose its path. Letters from Old Town grew more frequent, the maesters hungry for obsidian and accounts of any thy healing. Sansa sent word to each city and keep. Volunteers for study and service would be welcomed, passage and food guaranteed, rewards granted in land or coin. New schools sprouted in every major town, their stone walls bright with painted banners, children reading by day and learning to plant and harvest by evening. From the east, warnings rippled. A new fire priesthood gaining favor in Volantis, triarchy captains testing their truce by seizing small vessels, mercenary armies forming again in Lys. Tyrion managed the threat with equal parts wit and threat. Arya's spies sending ciphers about fleet movements and rumors of ancient weapons hidden in the Isles. Still, no new invasion came that year. Instead, the cities mended. Bridges rebuilt, aqueducts flowing. A new granary at White Harbor filled with last year's overabundant barley. Sansa traveled each summer, sometimes alone, sometimes with Brienne or Gendry or the orphaned children she had raised from infancy in the keep's nurseries. She walked markets, listened to grievances, watched contests of strength and stories, learned the new songs that bards invented in her honor and in the memory of those lost. In the autumn, John returned, this time with a child at his side. A girl of 7 with dark eyes and hair wild as a wolf. Her mother died last winter, he explained. There was no one left in the Frost Fangs. I brought her south to see what hope looked like. There. Sansa knelt, gathering the girl to her. You have a home here, she promised, if you wish it. The girl nodded, solemn and silent, and Sansa found herself recalling that same uncertain hope, the one she had once clung to in the corridors of Winterfell, in the gardens of King's Landing, on the snowy road to the Wall. The year waned toward winter. Lanterns were hung again, and the great bell tolled, marking the 5th anniversary of the Long Night's defeat. All across the realm, lights burned. High in the Eyrie, deep in the crypts of Winterfell, bright along the docks at White Harbor and Old Town. Sansa walked the streets in plain dress, her crown left behind, her face known to all. She stopped to share bread with dock workers, listened to the songs of children, watched the games of old men in the taverns. On the last night of the festival, she climbed the highest tower in the keep. The city sprawled beneath her, a tapestry of lanterns and hope, the scars of war hidden in shadow. Tyrion joined her, carrying a flask of sweet arbor gold. Do you think it will last? He asked, peering into the darkness. Peace is a fragile coin, easily spent. It will last as long as we work for it, Sansa answered, taking the flask and drinking deeply. Nothing else ever has. He nodded, watching the stars. You have built something here that even the dragons could not. I built it from fear and hunger and grief, she said, but also from love. Love for my people, love for my family. That is stronger than steel or fire or gold. And what of you? He asked, turning to study her. Is there room for your own happiness? Sansa smiled, a little sadly. I have moments, that is enough. Perhaps one day, more than moments. For now, I am content to see the realm content. A shooting star traced a line above the city, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed very small, very precious. As winter set in, new rumors flickered on the wind. A shadow gathering in the east, a claimant to the Stormlands raising banners in the ruins of Griffin's Roost, unrest in the Stepstones. Sansa received each with careful calm. She called counsel, read every report, and planned. Yet she slept each night with a sense of purpose, her burdens lighter for being shared. Jon remained through the snows, helping with harvest, teaching the wildling child to read, hunting with Ghost along the Godswood's edge. Arya returned with news from Lys and the Basilisk Isles, her blade never stained, but her eyes older than when she'd left. Gendry traveled the length of the realm, visiting every smithy, returning with new alloys and new ideas for forging tools and weapons both. Spring returned. In the city, new trees bloomed, crabapple and wild pear, grafted from the north and south, their petals like a fall of pale stars. Sansa walked the gardens at dawn, Brienne beside her, the wildling child skipping ahead. Do you regret? Brienne asked one morning, voice low, eyes soft. Regret? Sansa turned, considering. Sometimes, I regret the lives lost, the things undone, but I do not regret hope. She touched a new blossom, white and gold, and remembered her mother's hands, her father's laughter, her siblings' voices, each lost and found again in different ways. That evening, she wrote letters to every corner of the realm, promising aid, reminding each lord and lady of the realm's shared bond, its shared peace. She ended each with the same line, we stand together, or we fall alone. The letters went out on swift wings, and the world, battered and remade, waited for the next dawn. So the years spun onward. Peace held, uneven but living. Ships crossed the sea, coins and wheat and knowledge passed hand to hand. The heart trees thickened in every new godswood. The sept bells rang beside them, neither louder than the other. Children born after the war grew tall, never knowing the taste of true hunger. Old wounds closed and opened, but never bled the realm dry. Sansa Stark, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, watched over all, patient, unyielding, and, when she could, kind. She did not seek glory, but she found it in the quiet hours, in the laughter of children, in the loyalty of friends, in the slow green healing of a realm that remembered what it meant to survive. And when she looked from her balcony at sunrise, the snow and lantern light, and distant bells. She saw not just her city, but her family. Her great, unruly, battered, beloved family, stretching from sea to mountain, from field to God's wood, from memory into hope. It was enough. It would always be enough. Kai. A storm battered the eastern shore, whitecaps shattering against the new stone quays, the moan of the wind tangled in the rigging of ships in harbor. In the Red Keep, Sansa paced the length of her solar, while rain hammered the windows, casting shifting patterns on the stone floor and splashing her shoes when she dared open a shutter for fresh air. She relished the bite of it, the way the wind swept clean the stink of old smoke and sweat, the way the city was scoured and made raw beneath the hand of something larger than the worries of men and queens. When she closed the window, the air in the solar tasted like the sea. The years since the long night had sharpened her, smoothing away the raw grief of youth, but not the memory of it. Her steps traced careful circles in the faded carpets, her mind ever on the letters piled on her desk. Messages in a dozen hands and tongues, bearing tidings from all corners of the realm. Some were urgent, reports of skirmishes along the Dornish marches, a new crop blight in the riverlands, sea raids in the Shield Islands by desperate men flying no banners. Others spoke of small victories, a new granary at Fairmarket, a midwife school opening in White Harbor, a letter of thanks from the free folk for a shipment of salted beef and lemon root that had arrived just before the first snows. There were always troubles, always little triumphs, always the slow, ceaseless negotiation that was peace. She had learned to love the rhythm of it, the sense that with each decision, each word chosen carefully or discarded, the realm took another slow step from the abyss. She'd seen that edge too many times to forget how easily one stumbled. Her council met daily, sometimes twice, no longer out of fear, but because the realm required tending. Tyrion, wizened and quick as ever, ruled the coin and trade, coaxing prosperity from ashes. Brienne, now Lord Commander in truth, brought news of the garrisons, trained new generations of knights and captains, and quietly sent gold to the families of fallen watchmen each winter. Davos managed the fleets, old scars white against his hands as he charted courses for merchant ships and patrols alike. Gendry, called Lord of Storms and now by the people as often as his smiths, directed forges both here and in his own lands, sending tools, swords and plows in equal measure. Arya came and went, always with tidings from abroad or messages delivered by ways only she could manage. Always quick to vanish again with a wink and a promise of return. Sansa sat at the head of the table, never above her council, always at the heart of it. She remembered how her mother had ruled, a gentle voice when possible, an iron hand when needed, but always as a part of her family and her people. She strove to be the same, and when she couldn't, when the weight of the realm grew too great, she would walk the godswood planted just inside the city walls, kneeling in the snow and pressing her brow to the cold sap-slick bark of the heart tree, breathing in the silence until the wind through the branches sounded like her mother's voice. There were days of joy. The first spring after the Triarchy's defeat brought a surge of life. Markets teeming with apples and new cheese, street corner songs, the laughter of children too young to remember the dark years. The Festival of Lanterns grew each year, lanterns drifting above rooftops in bright rivers of color, each one painted with sigils and prayers. Sansa made a point to walk the city each festival, listening to old women mutter blessings, pausing to admire a lantern painted by a butcher's son, letting herself be just another face in the crowd as long as she could. Not all was peaceful, not all was well. Trouble, she had learned, was a tide. Sometimes hidden, sometimes crashing. Never far, the Triarchy rebuilt in the east, sending envoys wrapped in velvet and veiled threats. In the west, the Ironborn grumbled, their old ambitions restless in a world that no longer gave them room for raiding. In the south, Dorne tested the boundaries of alliance, the young prince growing bold and impatient. Bandit kings appeared from time to time, half peasant, half noble, always dangerous, testing the small folk's patience with the taxes and the slow rebuilding. She answered each in turn. With the Triarchy, she sent envoys of her own, merchants with gifts, knights with words sharper than swords. With the Ironborn, she offered shipyards and new contracts for trade, letting them build ships for others, turn their pride to coin instead of blood. With Dorn, she met the prince in person, sharing wine and olives in the water gardens, and listened, truly listened, until he believed the North and South could be friends. With the bandits, she was less forgiving. She sent Brienne, Davos, or Arya as needed, and more than one would-be rebel found themselves tried by a tribunal of small folk and lords together, not by the queen alone. But most days, the realm was quiet. Fields grew green, flocks multiplied, villages rebuilt in timber and stone, the orphan houses filled with laughter and lessons. The city's new libraries opened to children who would once have been sent to beg or starve. The septs and the godswoods and the red priests' fire shrines stood side by side, their people learning, sometimes slowly, sometimes not at all, to live without burning each other's homes. It was on such a day without crisis, a day of drizzle and bells and the distant sound of hammers, that Sansa received a letter from the farthest east, penned in crabbed script on pale blue parchment. It was from Arya, who had been in Yeti and beyond, and it told of dragons. Small, wild, hungry things seen flying above ruined towers, no longer the great lords of the air, but not yet vanished from the world. Sansa read the letter twice, then again, then laid it flat on the table and stared at the flames. She remembered fire, remembered the red waste and the ruins, the smell of ash and fear. But she remembered hope too. The hope that her reign would never need the old weapons, that peace could be held by the hand and not by the sword. That night, as rain eased to a hush and the city began to dream, she called council. Tyrion came in slippers and a patched cloak, Brienne straight from the yard, Gendry in a leather apron. Davos limped in, groaning about the cold, and Maester Wolkin carried a small sheaf of letters from the citadel. Arya was not there, but her presence lingered in the letter and in Sansa's voice as she read it aloud. They debated long what it would mean if dragons truly returned, what it would mean for their fragile peace, their careful alliances. Some urged caution, others action. Gendry, ever practical, suggested forging new ballistae. Brienne recommended watching and waiting, letting rumor prove itself. Tyrion wondered aloud what magic might yet sleep in the world, and whether it was their place to wake it or leave it dreaming. Sansa listened, then spoke. "The realm is strong," she said, "but strength alone is not enough. If the world is changing, we must change with it, not against it. We do not hunt dragons, nor do we deny them. We prepare quietly, wisely, and with hope. If the day comes that a dragon lands in our fields, we will greet it as we greet any stranger, wary but not without mirth." So it was decided. Scouts went out, not in search of conquest, but of knowledge. Letters were sent to every keep and council, every friend and former enemy. Be vigilant. Share what you know. Trust the realm to weather what comes. The months rolled by, and while rumors of dragons flickered, no beasts came to the city. There were stranger things. A comet in the north. A child in Dorne born with eyes as golden as the sun. A sailor who claimed to have sailed to the world's edge and seen a city built of glass. The realm endured, stories blossoming like wildflowers after rain. Seasons passed. Sansa grew older, her hair streaked with silver, her step less quick, but never hesitant. Her court changed. New faces, new voices, some old friends gone to the gods. Others grown from children into counselors and knights of their own. Jon returned more often, the wildling girl at his side, grown tall and sure. Her laugh echoing in the halls as she challenged squires and stable boys to races in the yard. One summer, Sansa visited Winterfell, traveling north with Brienne and Gendry, the journey slower than in youth, but more welcome for it. The north was wild and green, the air bracing and clean. The castle had been rebuilt, the crypts tended, the gods' wood thriving. She sat beneath the heart tree and listened to the leaves, to the wind, to the distant sounds of children playing at swords. When the northern lords gathered, she listened to their grievances and hopes, their promises and fears, and she reminded them gently that the North's strength had always been in its loyalty, not just to Starks, but to one another. In Winterfell, Jon asked if she ever grew tired of leading, tired of holding so much together with only words and will. "Sometimes," she answered, "but I'm never tired of hope." He smiled, eyes soft. "You have built a better world, Sansa. It's what Father would have wanted." She laid a hand on his. "It's what we all wanted once. I only hope it's enough." Nanan. They rode south together. Slower still, the road lined with summer wildflowers, villages waving as the Queen's procession passed. When she returned to King's Landing, the city felt different. Smaller, perhaps, but dearer. She walked the walls at dusk, lanterns glowing like stars at her feet. The air warm and full of promise. Autumn brought new challenges, a harvest blight in the Reach, rumors of unrest in the Vale, a storm that shattered a third of the fishing fleet at Duskendale. Sansa faced each with the patience and care that had come to define her reign. She traveled as needed, counseled lords and small folk alike, and always returned to the Godswood in each place, seeking the quiet that made wisdom possible. When winter came again, the people did not fear. Stores were full, alliances strong, and the city rang with laughter and music through the coldest nights. Brienne's knights patrolled in pairs, children slept warm in their beds, and the heart tree in the city's Godswood stood tall, its bark red as memory and its roots deep as hope. On her 50th name day, the realm gathered for a feast. Lords and ladies, merchants and masons, children and orphans, each offered gifts, stories, songs. Tyrion read a poem. Davos told a tale of storms weathered and ships saved. Gendry gave her a sword, never to be used, but beautiful, engraved with every major city and house in the realm. Arya, who arrived last, pressed a coin into Sansa's palm, whispering, "For luck, sister. Should you ever wish to disappear?" Sansa laughed, heart light. "Let's hope it never comes to that." After the feast, she walked the Godswood once more, the night crisp and clear. She thought of all that had changed and all that remained. She thought of her mother and father, of Robb and Bran and Rickon, of Jon and Arya, of all the children of the realm, born and not yet born. She thought of her own hopes and fears, of the endless work still ahead, of the peace she had helped win, the wounds she had helped heal. She whispered a prayer to the old gods and the new, to whatever watched over her city and her people. She wished for wisdom, for strength, for the grace to know when to lead and when to let go. In the years that followed, the realm flourished. There were wars on distant shores, troubles in far places, but none that reached so deeply as before. The Seven Kingdoms, still not unbroken, but bound by something stronger than fear, looked to the future with hope. Sansa ruled until she could no longer then pass the crown, by her own hand, to one she trusted, chosen not by blood or birthright, but by merit and the acclaim of the people. She spent her last days at Winterfell, surrounded by family and the sound of laughter, the snow falling soft as memory beyond her window. On the night she died, the bells of every sept and every Godswood tolled in mourning. Lanterns rose again over King's Landing, a river of light in the darkness, drifting north on the wind. And so the realm remembered her, not as a conqueror, nor as a dragon, but as the queen who chose mercy over pride, hope over despair, peace over power. Her name became legend, her story a lantern burning in the long night, guiding those who came after. The world spun on, battered but unbroken, and the hope she had planted grew, season by season, into the living heart of the Seven Kingdoms. In the hush before dawn, the old stones of Winterfell breathed with frost and memory. The heart tree's red leaves hung heavy, a slow drizzle of crimson settling on clean snow beneath its ancient boughs. Sansa moved alone through the Godswood, her cloak trailing, a wisp of gray against the luminous white. Her hair, touched now by silver, was braided in the style of her youth, a gesture both of remembrance and of mourning. For weeks, since the bells had told the passing of her greatest friend, she had wandered these paths, listening to the wind speak through the branches and finding solace in the deep quiet of the north. The realm was changed, It always changed. Decades of peace had not bred complacency, but instead had nurtured a new resilience. A kingdom where justice was sharper than old enmities, where fields grew green across scars of war. King's Landing, rebuilt and thriving, pulsed with trade and the laughter of children who knew hunger only as a tale told in winter. Even the far-flung borders of Dorne and the iron-bound shores of Pike had found their place in the great woven tapestry of the realm. Yet Sansa, though revered and beloved, had relinquished the crown to a council of elected lords and commoners, a circle of power wider than any crown could circumscribe. She was called Queen in the North again, though she ruled not from command, but by the force of wisdom and memory, the heartbeat of a legacy that would outlast her name. Each morning, as the crows roused the keep, Sansa gathered in the great hall with her kin, nieces and nephews, grandchildren, distant cousins drawn home by news of her waning health. The days were filled with stories. Old faces, Brienne bent but indomitable. Gendry, grizzled and smiling, hands still stained from the forge. Arya, ever restless, appearing at windows in the first light, leaving again at dusk, a rumor as much as a sister. Jon came and went with the seasons. The wildling girl grown now into a leader among her people, sometimes sitting at Sansa's knee, as if she were a child again. The stories flowed, all the same, of hardship, of small triumphs, of things mended and lost. The children clamored for tales of dragons and battles, but Sansa favored quieter memories. The true work of queens, she would say, is not in swords, but in bread, in justice, in the patience to listen. She told them of the lantern festivals and the rebuilding, of the time when hope was as fragile as a spring shoot, of the cost of peace, and why it was always worth paying. One night, as the aurora spilled color over the snows, Arya asked, "Do you regret not seeking more?" Her voice was low, a whisper just for Sansa in the quiet bedchamber. Sansa smiled, touching the rough edge of Arya's scarred hand. "More? I have seen the end of winter and the dawn that followed. I have watched 1,000 children grow who might have died. I have buried friends, yes, but I have seen the realm endure. What could I regret?" Arya was silent a long moment. "Sometimes I still want to sail," she confessed, "to find what lies beyond everything we know." "Then sail," Sansa said, "but leave your heart here with those who love you, and send your stories home." In the city, King's Landing blossomed each spring. The Lantern Festival had become a week of feasting and light. Ships on the Blackwater festooned with silk and colored glass, bells chiming from every tower. The people no longer feared the gathering of banners. The old rivalries had faded, replaced by the fierce pride of shared survival. In the Reach, fields of barley stretched to the horizon, a patchwork quilt of gold and green. In Dorne, water gardens overflowed, welcoming pilgrims from across the seas. Even on Skagos, once wild and grim, markets rang with music and laughter. Everywhere Sansa's reforms endured. The orphan houses flourished, libraries and schools now pillars of every town. The trade routes, protected by treaties and by the silent threat of a still formidable fleet, carried more than goods. They carried stories, songs, new ideas. The maesters recorded it all, though it was often said that the best tales were those passed hand to hand, mother to child, over bread at the evening fire. There were shadows, as always. In the east, a new warlord with a claim of Valyrian blood gathered followers, and from time to time word came of unrest on the distant steppes. The Ironborn flirted with rebellion now and then, but their sons and daughters had found profit enough in shipwright contracts and free passage to Braavos. When threats rose, the council met. No longer only lords, but traders, healers, even the rare wise woman or hedge knight whose word had proved valuable. It was a government by design and necessity, its very breadth a check on the old ambitions that once drowned kingdoms in blood. The years wound on. Tyrion was the first of her council to die, old, half-blind, his wit undimmed. The bells tolled for him in every city. Davos followed not long after, lost at sea, but remembered in the stories of every dockside tavern. Brienne died defending a band of shepherds from raiders. Her sword returned to Sansa by a boy she'd saved, who had become a knight in turn. Gendry's forges outlasted him, his apprentices inheriting his blueprints and his stubborn sense of justice. Arya, never home long, sent letters and treasures from distant lands, shells, carved stones, strange coins, stories written in a script no maester could decipher. Sansa felt her age at last, the weariness settling in bones that had been restless since childhood. She moved more slowly, needed help up the stairs, but her mind remained sharp. Her voice the anchor of every council. She attended marriages and funerals, named day feasts and harvest fairs, always smiling, always gentle. Children called her grandmother even if she was no kin. The people of the North called her Wolf Mother, a title that made her laugh until she wept. As her final winter approached, she made a pilgrimage, south to King's Landing, across the Riverlands and the Reach to Old Town, and then back north by slow carriage. She visited every godswood she could, kneeling to pray for the souls of the lost, the living, and the yet unborn. In each place, people gathered, bringing gifts, bread, salt, lanterns, psalms, small tokens of gratitude. She carried nothing but a simple pack, wore her old cloak, and traveled with only Brienne's old shield, now scuffed and battered but beloved, and Arya's coin for luck. The last stop was Winterfell, her home and her heart. The godswood was blanketed in new snow, the heart tree's face older, its eyes deep. Sansa knelt, pressed her hand to the bark, and closed her eyes. In that silence she remembered everything. The chill of King's Landing in winter, the warmth of her mother's arms, the laughter of her siblings, the ache of loss, the surge of hope. She saw the lanterns rising over the city, heard the bells tolling, felt the weight and the wonder of the crown. She saw the realm whole and healed, its people stronger than ever, and she knew peace. On the final night, surrounded by kin and companions, Sansa sat in the great hall, the fire bright and the snow falling outside. The children sang old songs, and the adults toasted her with mead and memories. Arya sat close, holding her hand. Jon, older but unbowed, poured her the last cup of sweet wine. Brienne's shield leaned against her chair, ghost descendants curled at her feet. Sansa spoke little, her words gentle and sparse. "Remember what we built," she said. "Not the walls or the banners or the feast, but the trust. That is what will endure." As midnight approached, she retired to her chamber, the familiar weight of the old wolf pelt across her feet. She dreamed, as she so often had, of Winterfell in summer, of green fields, laughter, and running water. She dreamed of her mother, Ned, of Robb and Rickon and Bran, of all those who had walked these halls. She dreamed of lanterns rising, of a realm at peace. When the morning came, she was gone, soft as a sigh, her face peaceful, her hands folded over her heart. The snows fell thick and silent. The bells tolled in Winterfell, in King's Landing, across every town and village, each chime a prayer, a promise, a song. The council met, as she had taught them, and ruled with wisdom and care. Arya sailed west once more, carrying Sansa's stories. Jon remained in the north, a steady guide for the wild and the gentle alike. The children grew, the realm endured, and every spring, lanterns filled the sky. A river of light, bright against the dusk, the memory of a queen who had chosen hope over fear, mercy over power, and left the realm better than she had found it. Thus did Sansa Stark pass into legend. Thus did her people remember, not for the wars she fought, but for the peace she won and the world she made possible, a world of stories, of laughter, of kindness, and of light. And so her memory endured, as bright and unyielding as the northern stars, as soft and eternal as falling snow. Ika. Spring thaw came late that year, and the woods beyond Winterfell were rimmed with silver even as the sun rose higher, chasing the darkness back into the earth. Sansa's passing had called forth a season of remembrance, her name whispered with the tenderness and reverence that mothers reserve for lullabies and old maesters for sacred texts. In the north, the heart trees bloomed early, their red leaves bright against the lingering snow, and everywhere in the realm, from the white cliffs of Gulltown to the blue-green hills of Highgarden, the bells rang, and the people gathered to honor the queen, who had been more than a ruler, a mother to the land itself. The council she left behind governed well in her absence, as she had designed. The assembly of lords and commons, shipwrights and singers, shepherds and septons, met each fortnight in the old throne room of Winterfell. The hall warmed by great fires and the light of lanterns fashioned after those Sansa had loved. In King's Landing the Lantern Festival outshone all years before, a week of music and feasting and stories told in every market square. On the first night, Jon Snow stood before the heart tree transplanted from Winterfell's ancient grove, speaking few words but holding the gathered crowd in thrall. She taught us not only how to live through darkness, but how to meet the dawn together. Let each lantern we light tonight be a promise, a vow that her peace will not fade with winter, but will guide us, as she did, through whatever storms may come. Lanterns drifted by the thousands over the Blackwater, painting the river in shimmering gold and blue. In the alleys and the heights, strangers embraced, and the bells chimed into the morning, their song answered by echoes from Old Town to White Harbor. The seasons rolled forward, carrying the living and the memory of Sansa's reign along their slow tide. The North was governed by Lady Alice Karstark, chosen for her wisdom and gentleness, her voice trusted in both market and council. She kept alive the Queen's legacy, expanding the orphan houses, planting new godswoods in every town. In the Riverlands, Sir Brynden Blackwood and his council rebuilt the old keeps, drained the marshes, and filled the valleys with new grain. Gendry, Lord of Storm's End, grew gray and stout, his children apprenticed to forges and council chambers alike, and sent every year a new bell to the Queen's Tower, each one cast with an image from the life of Sansa. A wolf, a lantern, a girl with her mother's eyes. Arya's letters arrived less frequently now, each one a puzzle of maps and tales, cities of glass in the far west, islands ringed with colored sand, peoples who tamed wild stags and rode them as horses, new kinds of fruit and grain that Sansa's successors would one day introduce to Westeros. She always ended her messages with a wish for home. May the lanterns burn bright in your windows when I return. Jon Snow never claimed lordship or crown, though the North would have bent the knee to him in a heartbeat. He became a figure of legend, shepherding wildlings and Northmen alike, his white wolf's descendants roaming with their packs at his side. He would come down each autumn for the Lantern Festival, standing by the heart tree as the lanterns rose and watching the faces of 100 children who knew only the peace their elders had won. In King's Landing, the city grew beyond the lines of the old walls, its harbor filled with merchant ships from a dozen kingdoms. The Braavosi counting house thrived, its fortunes tied to the prosperity of Westeros, and the Iron Bank's envoys learned that it was more profitable to nurture than to threaten. Trade flourished. Food was plentiful. The city was ruled by a council, its seats filled by the wise, the just, the bold, and the kind. No one remembered the Iron Throne as anything but a cautionary tale, a story told to frighten children who would rather fight than listen. The new council chamber, rebuilt of Winterfell stone and glass from Old Town, stood at the city's heart, open to the sky save for the sweeping boughs of a transplanted heart tree. Meetings were held beneath its leaves, and the people of the city often gathered outside the low stone walls to hear the debates, to lend their voices, or to carry news home to every street and alley. It was said that the Queen's crown, the old bronze circlet, its fangs blunted with age and use, rested now in a place of honor, surrounded by letters, sketches, and small tokens sent from every corner of the world. Each year, on Sansa's birthday, the council would gather in silence around the crown, and the oldest among them would tell the story of the first Lantern Festival, and the youngest would promise, "We will As peace became habit, the wounds of the old wars faded. The Ironborn sent more ships to trade than to raid, and their songs grew richer and more mournful. In the Vale, the Eyries were open to pilgrims and travelers, and the sky roads patrolled not by knights, but by watchful shepherds. The reach became a breadbasket, the arbor's vineyards swelling with each new vintage, and the Dornish prince, now an old man himself, sent every spring a gift of oranges and salt to every orphan house in the north. The free folk in the far north became friends to the realm, their children welcomed as fosterlings in castles and towns. On Skagos, the ancient rituals were kept, but the island's lords sent delegates to every council, and their obsidian was prized for artistry as much as for sword-making. There were challenges, of course: harvest failures, storms, the slow grind of disease. But never again did the realm break as it had before. Sansa's greatest lesson, the wisdom of many voices, the power of mercy, endured. When disputes threatened to tear the peace, the council called for witnesses from every corner, from orphan house to noble hall, and settled their grievances in the open. When hard winters struck, food and aid traveled as swiftly to the humblest village as to the great keeps. When rumors of war flickered from beyond the narrow sea, the realm sent envoys first, and arms only as a last resort. And so, as years passed, and children became parents, and parents became the honored elders who remembered, the memory of Sansa's reign deepened into the very bones of the realm. Every spring, as the snows melted and the first green touched the fields, people gathered in the streets and on the hills, in keeps and in cottages, to light their lanterns. It was not just in King's Landing or Winterfell, but in every corner where her name was known. The old songs were sung, new verses added each year. Of the queen who taught them to endure, who taught them to share bread, who ruled with patience, who chose mercy over pride. Children grew up asking not for swords, but for stories. They learned that greatness did not come from conquest or fear, but from listening, from kindness, from the promise kept through every hardship that we stand together or we fall alone. Sansa's own words became a refrain in council and cottage alike. Generations turned. 100 years passed, then another. The world beyond Westeros changed. New lands found, new ships built, new alliances forged. The banners of the old houses faded, but the lanterns remained, a river of light brightening every spring night, watched by old gods and new hope. In a quiet hall at Winterfell, the heart tree grew wider still, its face nearly vanished beneath moss and age. Beneath its branches, the queen's circlet, and the sword Gendry had given her were kept in a stone casket, guarded not by soldiers, but by the children of the keep. When travelers asked about them, the children would tell the tale, not of battles, but of lanterns, of hope, of a woman who had shaped the fate of the realm by teaching it to heal. It was said that some nights, when the aurora danced and the snow lay soft on the world, a figure could be seen beneath the heart tree, a woman with silvered hair watching the stars, her cloak woven of light and shadow. And when the wind blew through the boughs, it carried a song, a lullaby, a promise, a name. Sansa ... Wolf Mother ... Queen of Lanterns, Light of the North and of all the realm. So the memory of her reign passed not into dust or legend alone, but into every heart that lit a lantern, every voice that chose mercy, every council that listened before it ruled. In this way, Sansa Stark's gift became the marrow of the world, enduring long after her bones had vanished into the ancient earth, her light shining on as surely as the stars, each spring, forever. And in Kay, Onegin Suor, Pikmatherband of Groho. The riverlands burst into riotous green as another century turned. Meadows thick with wildflowers where once armies had trampled the earth to mud. Yet in the quiet before sunrise, when the wind drifted through the reeds and the bells of the farthest septs chimed only for the crows, the realm remembered its old stories. Sansa Stark's Lantern Festival endured as the first rite of spring, marking the end of winter and the hope that came after. The queen's name, pressed into the marrow of the land, lingered long after the faces of lords and kings had faded from memory. In Winterfell, the heart tree had grown mighty, its trunk wide as three men's outstretched arms, its face softened with moss, the eyes two deep hollows from which red sap sometimes wept in the season's first thaw. The keep was changed, larger now, halls strung with lanterns, walls inscribed with the verses of 100 poets. The queen's circlet, dulled to a smoky patina, rested atop the altar in the great hall, flanked by the sword gifted by Gendry and the battered shield once carried by Brienne of Tarth. New Stark children, born of names that mingled old and new, served as stewards of these relics, and their laughter echoed through the towers. Each year, at Festival's Eve, travelers came by road and river, daughters and sons of merchants, wildlings from beyond the wall, apprentices from Old Town's distant libraries, Dornish traders with salt on their boots and arbor gold on their tongues. They camped beneath the walls, their tents awash with song and firelight, trading stories and dreams until dawn. When the first lanterns rose, each bore a painted wish. For a bountiful harvest, for love, for the peace to endure another year. In the council hall, now open to all who wished to witness, a new assembly ruled. A tapestry of faces. A one-eyed wildling matron, a brown-skinned scholar from distant Sothorios, a smith's daughter from White Harbor, whose laughter could shake the rafters. The old houses were represented, but no one voice could drown the others. They governed with slow debate and consensus, as Sansa had taught, and disputes were settled not in secret, but in public, beneath the listening heart tree, or the lantern-bedecked rafters. A young bard named Tolan, hair gold as a river at noon, wrote a new song each year for the festival. He walked the roads of Westeros, gathering tales of kindness, a Tarth knight breaking up a feud with wit and bread, a free folk woman teaching Valemen to build winter shelters, a Tyrell orphan grafting reach roses in the stony ground outside Pike. These stories wove together in verses, sung through the night, until even the most cynical merchant could not help but join in. Far south, the cities of Dorne shimmered beneath blue banners. On the islands, iron-borne longships set out for trade rather than conquest, their hulls stacked with spices, ink, and rare timber. The great harbors of Old Town and King's Landing bustled with ships from lands once unknown, their sails bright with foreign sigils. And in every port, as the festival approached, local children painted lanterns and sang the old psalms. Some of them changed, some barely recognizable, all touched by the refrain, "We stand together, or we fall alone." The council kept correspondence with the distant lands. Envoys from Yiti brought silk and stories of golden emperors, who ruled with justice, learned from Sansa's writings, translated and debated in courts a world away. Ships from Ibn brought ice fur, and from Sothorios, vivid fruits that found their way to market stalls in Maidenpool and Lannisport. The Bravosi counting houses, once wary, now opened their vaults to the realm's ventures, investing in new roads and bridges, in public schools and healing halls. The once mighty Iron Bank had become not a yoke, but a partner, its ledgers often balanced by the skill of a Raven Master from Gulltown. A post now held by a woman whose grandmother had once begged for bread in the Queen's Market. In Old Town, the Maester's citadel expanded. The White Ravens flew not just to announce the turn of season, but to share news of discoveries. Herbs that could ward off fever, new ways to store grain, tales of peace brokered between free folk and Night's Watch, who now served as guardians of the ancient forests and guides to travelers seeking the northern lights. Rumors and threats still came with the winds. Pirates from the Jade Sea would be conquerors in distant Essos, the faintest whispers of magic returning with the birth of strange animals. An eagle with silver feathers, a mare that walked on water, a child born in Dorne, with hair the color of midnight. Yet for each shadow, the realm answered with light. Envoys, gifts, the promise that every lantern festival would be brighter than the last. In the north, the keep's youngest, a sharp-eyed girl named Sarah, took to reading the ancient ledgers and scrolls, determined to become the first mistress of lore since the time of Bran the Broken. She discovered, among Sansa's old letters, a sealed missive never opened. A short cryptic note from Arya, written in a foreign script. It spoke of new worlds, distant shores, and a circle of lanterns rising not only in Westeros, but wherever the stars shone on human kindness. Sarah brought the letter to council. The assembly, intrigued, commissioned ships to seek west beyond the Sunset Sea, to open friendship with any lands found there. The Queen's lantern, named in Sansa's honor, became the flagship, carrying not swords or conquerors, but bards, scholars, healers, and seeds from every field in Westeros. Some ships never returned, but those who did brought stories and gifts. Blue corn, sweet fruits, birds whose feathers sang, strange instruments, songs with new rhythms. The world, vast and full of possibility, reached back to the realm Sansa had helped to shape. Each winter, when the snows grew thick, the Council of Winterfell, joined by guests from every kingdom and far shore, would sit before the great fire and recount the year's lanterns. One year, a Dornish boy had sent his wish with a lantern all the way to the Broken Arm, where it was found by fishermen who sent him a pearl in return. Another year, a free folk mother lit a lantern for her daughter's recovery. When the girl survived, the village painted their own lanterns with wolves and sunbursts, sending thanks to the Queen's memory. Ghost Line, always pale as moonlight, wandered the woods, never tamed, but never feared. The people told children to listen for their howls on festival night, signs that the realm was watched over, and that no one was truly alone. 1,000 stories, each small as a lantern in the dark, formed the life of the realm. There were tales of lovers reunited on the last night of winter, of old rivals sharing bread, of villages saved from storm or fire by neighbors' help. Maesters wrote these stories down, but it was the telling, heart to heart, that kept them alive. As the years stretched on, the memory of Sansa herself blurred into legend. The Wolf Mother, the Lantern Queen, the gentle hand that taught the realm to trust in the light they kindled together. Yet her wisdom, mercy, patience, the refusal to rule by fear, endured in the very bones of Westeros. When the council debated great matters, they left an empty chair beneath the heart tree, in her memory. Each time, the chair gathered petals in spring, snow in winter, and sometimes, on the stillest nights, a pale moth would land upon it and stay until the first rays of dawn. So Westeros thrived, battered but whole, its heart a steady lantern against the gathering dark. The Queen's gift, hope, shared and stubborn, was the inheritance of every soul who walked the starlit roads of the realm. And in every generation, children stood beneath the spring sky, lifted their painted lanterns, and watched them rise into the night. Each a spark, each a story, each a promise kept. The dusk was soft gold over the marshes, the sky streaked with cloud threads, the color of mother of pearl. Along the riverbanks, willows wept into the gentle water, and everywhere the world seemed unhurried, the land at peace. In that peace, the legacy of Sansa Stark deepened, settling like gentle rain into the roots of every house and hamlet, every market town and city square, until her name was less a memory than an instinct, something sewn into the fabric of Westeros itself. In Winterfell, centuries passed in quiet revolution. The keep grew, towers added, walls thickened, courtyards blooming with wild roses, herbs, and groves of transplanted heart trees. Lanterns still hung from every eave. Their colored glass replaced every spring at festival time. The old wolf statues weathered smooth, and the Queen's circlet darkened until it gleamed only when touched by firelight. But the heart tree, ancient and enormous, remained the soul of the place, its roots rumored to reach every corner of the north. The Queen's Lantern Festival became not only a night of hope, but a season. For weeks before the equinox, travelers arrived by the hundreds. Free folk with reindeer teams, septons and silent sisters, healers from the citadel, ironborn merchants, Sothorian herbalists, Valemen bringing hives of blue honey, even a handful of summer islanders with drums that could echo for miles. They brought gifts, recipes, songs, seeds, and stories, sharing news and laughter as the halls filled with a medley of accents and dialects. On the first night, the council, now a body whose members shifted with the will of the people and the wisdom of the elders, held open assembly. Anyone could speak, from the humblest shepherd to the most powerful merchant, and the councilors listened, debated, and shaped the year's work from what they heard. Petitions might take all night, but no one minded. The hall was bright with lanterns and warmed with mulled cider. And in the galleries, children drifted off to sleep as their parents waited to speak. It was a far cry from the old days, when power moved behind closed doors. Yet, the new way endured, for it was not built on the brittle foundation of fear, but on trust. Painstakingly built, tenderly guarded, tested with each season's challenge, but never yet broken. After assembly, the festival itself unfolded. Lanterns, painted, carved, etched, sewn with beads and silver thread, hung in every window, then were released from the highest towers to drift over the snowy woods. Lanterns shaped like wolves and ships, dragons and stags, wild roses and sunbursts, even the clever lizard lions of distant ET, bobbed through the sky, bearing hopes and dreams inscribed within. The custom of the lantern wish had become as important as the lantern itself. Children brought their wishes to the council the next morning, reading them aloud if they wished, or whispering them into a great silver urn that was kept sealed for the year. The council made a point to grant as many as it could. A bridge repaired, a library founded, a sick aunt visited by a maester, a dispute settled before it could sour. Each granted wish was marked by a new lantern, hung in the god's wood for all to see. The realm beyond Winterfell was likewise transformed. King's Landing, no longer the seat of a single monarch, pulsed as the trade and cultural heart of Westeros. The great river harbors stretched almost to the sea, their wharves lined with ships from across the world. Lantern makers there had formed their own guild, and it was said a single lantern from the capital could fetch enough coin in Far Ibn or Old Volantis to feed a family for a year. The city's council governed with open hand and keen eye. Disputes between merchant guilds and riverfolk were arbitrated by representatives from all classes. The city was safe. No gold cloaks now, but a watch recruited from every district, answerable to the people and the laws. Even the poorest children could read and write, and the orphanages Sansa founded had grown into schools and houses of healing, their names honored in festival speeches as often as any noble house. Far to the south, Dorne flourished. The descendants of the old princes and princesses still ruled, but in council with their city folk and traders. Water gardens dotted the coast. The desert road was marked at intervals with fountains and shaded groves, built as a memorial to the long peace. The Dornish had adopted the Lantern Festival, lighting their own lamps and sending them floating down the Greenblood, their wishes riding the current toward the sea. In the west, the Lannisters had faded to memory. The gold mines at Casterly Rock ran dry, and new houses, many of humble origin, rose in their stead. The council at Lannisport grew famous for its open competitions in trade, invention, and verse. The Westerners, ever pragmatic, kept a festival of light to mark the spring planting. Their lanterns bore images of wheat, grape clusters, hammers, and sails. In the Reach, green fields and orchards stretched farther than any map could chart. Festivals here featured songs and pageants, and children planted trees for every lantern sent aloft. In the far north, the free folk and the old Northmen coexisted in harmony, their lines long since blurred. The wall, now only a symbol, was kept for its history and beauty, not as a barrier. Ghost's wild descendants were often glimpsed among the pines, regarded with awe and affection. The old song spoke of Sansa as Wolf Mother, and her lantern, set atop the wall's highest remaining tower, burned year-round, a beacon for travelers and a guide for the lost. Each year, the ships of the realm set out for distant lands. The Queen's Lantern was now a fleet, a dozen ships, all painted with festival scenes, carrying scholars, diplomats, and goods. Their holds contained grain, wool, wine, honey, and most prized of all, bundles of lanterns and seeds to be gifted abroad. Tales came back of lantern festivals, blossoming in the Jade Sea, of schools in Lys, named for Sansa, of peace treaties brokered in her memory. In Old Town, the Citadel's halls swelled with the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. Maesters wrote treatises not just on healing or history, but on justice, on peace, on the customs that bound a fractured world together. Their greatest work was the Chronicle of the Lantern, a living document updated each spring with the stories, challenges, and joys of every corner of the realm. But even as the world grew safer, change was its own certainty. There were years when the harvest failed in the riverlands, and lanterns floated on rivers, turned low and brown. Years when sea storms smashed the arbor's vineyards and sent ships tumbling onto rocky shores. When plague flickered through the north, the Lantern Festival was the only bright thing, each wish a call for healing and mercy. In such times, the council's work was hardest and most precious. They rode out to the afflicted, brought food and aid, invited the wise of every region to speak and advise. The realm bent but never broke, for the wisdom of Sansa's long peace remained. When the people could trust their voices would be heard, they would share what little they had, and they would endure. The stories of the Wolf Mother became a tapestry, some true, some grown fantastic in the telling. Children recited them by the hearth. How Sansa had tamed dragons with bread and song, how she had walked the snows with a lantern that never went out, how she had taught the realm that a crown could be as gentle as a mother's hand. Some stories were wilder still, that the heart tree's roots were her hair, spread across the land, that every wolf's howl was her voice, watching over them all. But it was in the quiet moments that her legacy was most keenly felt. When a village shared its last grain with its neighbor, when a counselor listened to a child's petition, when a lantern's light caught in the snow and reflected back as hope, then, it was said, the Wolf Mother smiled. On the 1000th Lantern Festival since her reign, the largest gathering in the realm's history took place at Winterfell. Thousands came, filling the fields for miles, their tents and banners a patchwork of every color and heraldry, of city and village, of distant land and kin. The council sat in open air beneath the blossoming heart trees, and for a full week, stories were shared, old grievances forgiven, new pledges made. Lanterns were painted, songs written, a new chronicle begun. At the festival's zenith, as the first stars rose, every lantern was lit, some with candles, some with clever devices of mirrored glass, some with bottled starlight brought by travelers from the east. The sky filled with light, a slow spiral of hope rising over the heart tree and out across the fields and rivers, visible even from the heights of the wall and the shores of the summer sea. In that moment, it seemed to all who watched, whether they believed in old gods, new gods, or none at all, that the realm itself breathed as one. And in that breath, the world remembered, not the sword, not the crown, not the banners of war, but the steady, stubborn, enduring light that had kindled hope through 1,000 winters. So the story continued, written in lantern light and laughter, in the wisdom of councils and the kindness of strangers, in the hearts of those who would never know Sansa's face, but would forever carry her gift, the courage to hope, and the grace to share it.